Prepare the way of the Lord, oh, the way of the Lord. Make straight paths for his feet, clear a way in the streets, prepare your hearts to meet the one who is coming. Every valley shall be raised, the rough places become plains. His salvation comes today to those who would receive him. Yeah. Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. What his words have foretold, all together we'll behold every knee bending low on the day of his coming. Now is the time of urgency. You must repent and believe, for the day of reckoning comes with his coming. Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. Prepare the way of the Lord. Oh, the way of the Lord. Yes, the way of the Lord. The King who is coming. Yes, the King is coming. He is coming. The King is coming. The King is coming. The King is coming. Yahweh, 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 Yahweh.
Okay, welcome everybody. This is Torah Portions here on Kingdom in Context, and I'm Sean, your host. I appreciate you joining us this morning. We're excited to dive back into our Torah Portions. We've been studying Genesis, and this week we'll be reviewing Genesis 26 through 28. So we have some fun companion passages as well, and I'd also like to welcome a guest who's going to join me today. This is our brother Hannibal. Hey, brother, how you doing today?
Doing just fine. How
All
you
right,
doing?
welcome. Yeah, I'm doing great, and I appreciate you joining me today to read along. And we're going to dive into some interesting content pertaining to Jacob's life and Isaac's life. And so I'm excited for you to join me today. And,
Yeah, it's going to be fun.
Yeah, I think so. I just want to say hi real quick to a couple of people we see a lot in the live chat. And GR Cleve is back, and McKenzie, Blue Doves, R.A. Tacky, Windfeather, Crispy Chips is back. Miss Marsh is here. Anthony, Rose, Misty Tarleton, Obed, Yaya Q. Welcome, everybody. Appreciate you guys being back. Inez Loved is back. Anita Vega. Welcome, everybody. Tom, welcome, brother. Tom is here. Beetlejuice is back. Welcome, everybody. Caitlin Aguanaga, I hope I said that right. Chico 1985, welcome, everybody. So, guys, we've got a fun discussion today. We got a couple special segments that we'll be doing as well to hopefully spur discussion and thought. And as always, these slides that we're going to be reviewing today is actually going to be, they're already posted for free on our Patreon page. So you can access them for free. It's in the video description below. And that way, if you want to have these as a private study for your family or your group as well, they're all laid out. And as you'll see, there's even going to be footnotes in these slides that are points of discussion and study that we may not even cover in the broadcast today. So just extra additional stuff that you could do with your personal study at home in your home fellowship. So without further ado, let's jump into it. You ready, Hannibal?
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right. So let's look at Genesis 26. You're the guest today, brother. Do you want to read the first chapter?
Absolutely.
All right.
All right. Now there was another famine in the land, subsequent to the one that had occurred in Abraham's time. And Isaac went to Abimelech, king of the Philistines at Gerar. Yahweh appeared to Isaac and said, "Do not go down to Egypt. Settle in the land where I tell you. Stay in this land as a foreigner, and I will be with you and bless you. For I'll give all these lands to you and your offspring, and I will confirm the oath that I swore to your father Abraham. I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and I will give them all these lands. And through your offspring all nations of the earth will be blessed, because Abraham listened to my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." So Isaac settled in Gerar. But when the men of that place asked about his wife, he said, "She's my sister." For he was afraid to say, "She's my wife," since he thought to himself, "The men of this place will kill me on account of Rebekah, because she is so beautiful." When Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, king of the Philistines, looked down from the window and was surprised to see Isaac caressing his wife Rebekah. Abimelech sent for Isaac and said, "So she really is your wife? How could you say she is my sister?" Isaac replied, "Because I thought I might die on account of her." "What is this you have done to us?" asked Abimelech. "One of my people could have easily slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us." So Abimelech warned all the people, saying, "Whoever harms this man or his wife will surely be put to death." Now Isaac sowed seed in the land, and that very year he reaped 100-fold. And Yahweh blessed him, and he became richer and richer until he was exceedingly wealthy. He owned so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. So the Philistines took dirt and stopped up all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the days of his father Abraham. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, "Depart from us, for you are much too powerful for us." So Isaac left that place and encamped in the valley of Gerar and settled there. Isaac reopened the wells that had been dug in the days of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died, and he gave these wells the same names his father had given them. Then Isaac's servants dug in the valley and found a well of fresh water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, "The water is ours." So he named the well Esek, because they contended with him. Then they dug another well and quarreled over that one also, so he named it Sitnah. He moved on from there and dug another well, and they did not quarrel over it. He named it Rehoboth and said, At last, Yahweh has made room for us, and we will be fruitful in the land. From there, Isaac went up to Beersheba, and that night Yahweh appeared to him and said, "I am the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you and multiply your descendants for the sake of my servant Abraham." So Isaac built an altar there and called on the name of Yahweh, and he pitched his tent there. His servants also dug a well there. Later, Abimelech came to Isaac from Gerar with Ahuzath, his advisor, and Pichol, the commander of his army. "Why have you come to me?" Isaac asked them. "You hated me and sent me away." "We can plainly see that Yahweh has been with you," they replied. "We recommend that there should now be an oath between us and you. Let us make a covenant with you, that you will not harm us, just as we have not harmed you, but have done only good to you, sending you on your way in peace. And now you are blessed by Yahweh." So Isaac prepared a feast for them, and they ate and drank. And they got up early the next morning and swore an oath to each other. Then Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. On that same day, Isaac's servants came and told him about the well that they had dug. "We have found water," they told him. So he called it Sheba, and to this day the name of the city is Beersheba. When Esau was 40 years old, he took as his wife Judith, the daughter of Beri the Hittite, and Basemath, daughter of Elon the Hittite, and they brought grief to Isaac and Rebekah.
Okay.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. Thanks, brother. I
Yeah.
appreciate you. That was great. And there's quite a bit in this chapter. There really is. There's a lot to go over as far as a lot of interaction, a lot of different events taking place, and some unique names, tough to pronounce. So good job on you for bearing through some of those.
Yeah.
So for the folks watching along at home, what we try to do with each chapter is have a summary for you. Okay. So this way these are points of discussion for you and your home fellowship. If you want to do that as well, you can have some places to pick up conversation. And just as in general, a quick a quick summary of what we just read was during the time of famine in Canaan, Yahweh appears to Isaac in the form of an angel to tell him not to go to Egypt. Yahweh also reaffirms his covenant with Isaac. So, Annabelle, as you've been following along the last few weeks with our Torah portion, we've been finding out how much interaction there has been between angels and Abraham and Isaac. So this is another interesting moment where an angel appears to him, but the wording can be a little tricky because the wording says, "And the Lord appeared to him." What are your thoughts on
that? I mean, earlier in my walk, I believe that this was at first the Father, but then I realized pretty quickly when our Messiah said that no one has seen him, then I thought, well, of course, then it has to be the Son, because the Son told his disciples that if you've seen me, then you've seen my Father. But then throughout more studying, came across the concept of agency that we see all throughout the scriptures. And then, of course, supplementing Genesis with Jubilees, you see that angels are interacting with the righteous men all throughout the scriptures. And what I find interesting also with the beginning of this chapter is that the angel affirms that since Abraham did follow the commandments that we see in Genesis 17, that if you walk blamelessly before me, then I'll be able to make this covenant between you and me, and your descendants will inherit this land and live there forever. All right. So I just like how we continually see this being referenced back to Abraham, who was called a friend of Yah. So yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. He's not shy in sending his messengers to help out these faithful men whom he considered friends because they were extremely faithful and obedient to the terms of the covenant. It's just and a lot of people may hear that statement and think, oh, that sounds very religious. Well, the terms of the covenant is simply loving your neighbor and loving God. Like it's
exactly,
that's that's what it all hangs upon. But as it gets broken down into specific details for context, this is where Abraham was diligent in applying this, and he passed that trait and that learning on to Isaac. Isaac was also diligent in applying this. Were they perfect? No, they made some mistakes from time to time, but they still kept at it for the rest of their life. It's funny, when I first became a believer, I was 17 years old. And then I remember at my school, I tried to start a Bible study on Wednesdays during lunchtime, and so it was funny because like the first 2 or 3 meetings, it turned into like 20 people showing up. And I didn't know what to do, but they're looking at me like, well, you're the one who called this Bible study. Are you going to teach us something? So like looking at me to try to like read and teach. And then here I am, just a brand new baby in the word, and just had not a clue what I was doing. And I remember I had a history class before that break in that time period. And so I remember trying to like gather notes in my history class. It's like, what am I even going to read? I had no clue. Right. So that I accidentally thrust myself into a place of teaching a long time ago. And one of the brothers in that Bible study group, he said to me one time in a private conversation, he said, how do you do this? Like, how do you, like, what are you trying to say? I've got to like think about everything I say before I say it. And he said, how do you like, just keep these things in your mind the whole time? Like, I can't do that. And I'm like, hey man, I'm not perfect at this either. But the fact that like I'm trying, that's, I think, at least, and this was my, 17-year-old way of trying to explain this the best I could. I was like, I think God just wants us to at least try. He's like, but I keep failing. I'm not going to be good at this. And I'm like, well, I'm not good at this either, but like, I'm willing to keep trying. And I plan to keep trying for the rest of my life. And I'm sure I'll get a little better at it at some point, and I just remember the look on his face. He was baffled. He was like, he was thinking he had to do it perfectly, otherwise he should just stop, and if we look at these examples of these men like Abraham and Isaac, and you're like, they were not perfect by any means, but they continued to try for the rest of their life. And the Father called them faithful for that. Yeah.
The definition of that word being, blameless or perfect is to be complete, right?
That's right.
And we see that.
Yeah. So we also have Isaac moves his family to the Philistine territory of Gerar. This is interesting, right? Because he's already in the land of Canaan, but he's now like literally living next to a Canaanite king, and apparently the same specific region. And his name was Abimelech. He was the king of Gerar at the time. And Abimelech, he sees Isaac caressing Rebekah and chastises Isaac for leading him to believe Rebekah was only his sister. We see his father had done this a few chapters earlier with both Pharaoh and also Abimelech. So it's interesting. I wonder if Abimelech was like, wonder who his
Again.
dad is. I recognize this event. Who's his dad? You know.
Yeah.
So, but he warns Abimelech does a service to Isaac after he discovers Rebekah is Isaac's wife and not just his sister. Abimelech warns the men of Gerar to not harm or touch Isaac and his wife. Now, real quick, I think Hannibal, I think we're going to get to this in the next Torah portion, but it could be, I could be wrong. We may see this in chapter 28, but at some point, Isaac refers to Rebekah as his sister. So in speaking to her, he says, I think he says, "Do not be worried, sister." I think this is in chapter 28, or maybe it's in the parallel account in Jubilees, where he's encouraging, he's going to tell Jacob to go to Laban's house to find a wife so that he doesn't take one of the daughters of the Canaanites or the daughters of the Hittites, because that was Rebekah's concern. And I think during that interaction, he calls Rebekah, "Don't worry, dear sister. I'll send him to my brother Laban, or our uncle Laban." So I wonder if he's using that term in like a faith type of, brother and sister in the faith.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that's Jubilees 27 that you're talking about, that moment where Rebekah, she is calming Jacob because he doesn't want to depart, because he says that it will seem evil in his father's eyes if he just leaves, right? And Rebekah says, "Don't worry, I'll talk to your dad." And instead of saying that Jacob needs to go and find a wife, needs to flee because of Esau, she comes with the whole, I'm weary to death because of these two Hittite women that Esau has picked. So Jacob sort of calms her and says, "Yeah, don't worry, sister. I'll send them away." But yeah, we see, I do think, I don't know if Abimelech did know that Abraham was Isaac's father, but it's sort of like, a really bad sense of deja vu. These Hebrews are trying to get him in trouble.
Yeah, it's funny. And again, Isaac does this for the same motivating reason Abraham did it. He's afraid the men of the land will actually take Rebekah. This seems to be a common fear amongst this territory of the behavior of the Canaanites. And so this is Isaac still having to deal with that, because technically he's living in the land of his enemies. These are people that are not friendly to the covenant of Yahweh. They're not, but inherently they're not, right? Because they worship Baal, they're worshiping other idols. But in this regard, Abimelech does show a sense of respect by warning all the people, do not touch both him or his wife. And I think that's interesting that he has to make a proclamation. So it seems as if Abimelech is validating this fear of Isaac, that this is a possibility for sure, right? That this could be happening. Isaac during his time there, though, he greatly increased his wealth to the point where Abimelech feared him and asked him to leave that immediate territory. I think this is interesting because it's like, dude, getting so wealthy that you're like, you're too powerful for us. You need to get out of here. Yeah. And that's the king telling you this.
Yeah. It's in 1 year too that he increased that mightily. It's intense.
That is a lot of blessing. That's a lot of favor from the Lord. And I believe this is a fulfillment of Deuteronomy 28. If you're obviously getting the blessings of the covenant, so that you're the head, not the tail, right? You're the lender, not the borrower kind of concept. But in the mind of those who are not trying to serve the Lord and do not respect the Lord's anointed, they fear him irrationally. This is what sin does. It creates an inherent or unfounded paranoia in the minds of someone, because it's based off fear, as opposed to the love that's produced from faith. So here he is asking him to actually leave, and I think it's troubling. Like, think about, you just moved to a new territory, you're doing well, your business is prospering, and then the king of that territory is like, "Hey man, you got to get out of here."
And it sort of seems like they assume that if they were in Isaac's position, then they would start oppressing. So they have this fear, like you mentioned, because they can't fathom that Isaac would be a righteous man and how a righteous man would act. So they're like, well, if I was in his situation, I would start oppressing and just taking whatever I want. So let's kick him out before he does that to us.
Yeah, it's wild, huh? How it's like projecting this idea. Oh, you're too powerful for us, man. You got to get out of here. And you're like, wait a minute. Like, he hasn't done anything. In fact, earlier he explained to you that he was afraid of the people of the land. So like, I don't know. Maybe there's just the enemy's working on him, trying to remove the righteous from the land, as always. But Isaac does eventually move and takes his family to a different region in Gerar. And the men of the new region quarreled with Isaac over well access, which is access to water. And so as a result, Isaac has to make an oath of mutual safety with Abimelech over the wells. And this is interesting because it kind of plays into what you were saying, Hannibal, where he's like, now Abimelech shows up as a matter of dispute over these wells to make an oath with Isaac to say, look, we won't bother you or attack you over these wells if you don't attack us over these wells. And Isaac's like, when have I ever showed aggression at any point?
Yeah.
You know,
and I don't know if I'm reading this into the text, but in verse 28, it seems, well, starting at verse 26, where Abimelech comes with his advisor and the command of his army. It doesn't seem like he's coming just for peace, because in verse 28 he says, we recommend that you make a covenant with us. Like if you don't, there might be consequences.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this, I didn't put this in the notes because it is in the Jubilees footnotes at the bottom. But what's interesting about this interaction, it says in Jubilees that Isaac made this oath under duress, basically.
Yeah.
Like he was forced into this oath. He didn't want to make this oath with them, but they were kind of like saying, like, look, here's what we got to do right now. And so he was just willing to just, figure it out and be at peace and not have to worry about all this. But yeah, this is the dealing with the unrighteous and all the problems that goes with it.
Yeah.
So, and then we get the chapters summed up with a little bit of information from Esau, how he took 2 wives from the daughters of the Hittites. And also many translations will call it Het, the daughters of Het. And this is where this word Hittite comes from. So this of course displeased Isaac and Rebekah because he's not taking a daughter amongst those who are supposed to be faithful in covenant to Yahweh. Yeah. He's taking a daughter amongst the lands of the nations that are worshiping false gods. So this is not good for Esau's heart, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. Is there anything else you'd like to talk about on 26?
No, I think that was it for this chapter for me.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, we'll jump into 27 real quick. All right. When Isaac was old and his eyes were so weak that he could no longer see, he called his son Esau and said to him, my son, here I am. Esau replied, look, said Isaac, I am now old and I do not know the day of my death. Take your weapons, your quiver and bow, and go into the field to hunt some game for me. Then prepare a tasty dish that I love and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die. Now Rebekah was listening to what Isaac told his son Esau. So when Esau went into the field to hunt game and bring it back, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, behold, I overheard your father saying to your brother Esau, bring me some game, prepare me a tasty dish to eat, so that I may bless you in the presence of the Lord before I die. Now, my son, listen to my voice and do exactly as I tell you. Go out to the flock, bring me 2 choice young goats, so that I can make them into a tasty dish for your father, the kind he loves. Then take it to your father to eat, so that he may bless you before he dies. Jacob answered his mother Rebekah, look, my brother Esau is a hairy man, but I'm a smooth-skinned. What if my father touches me? Then I would be revealed to him as a deceiver, and I would bring upon myself a curse rather than a blessing. His mother replied, your curse be on me, my son. Just obey my voice and go get them for me. So Jacob went and got 2 goats and brought them to his mother, who made the tasty food his father loved. And Rebekah took the finest clothes in the house that belonged to her older son Esau. She put them on her younger son Jacob. She also put the skins of the young goats on his hands and on the smooth part of his neck. Then she handed her son Jacob the tasty food and bread she had made. So Jacob went to the father and said, my father, here I am. He answered, which one are you, my son? Jacob said to his father, I'm Esau, your firstborn. I have done as you have told me. Please sit up and eat some of my game so that you may bless me. But Isaac asked his son, how do you ever find it so quickly, my son? Because the Lord your God brought it to me, he replied. Then Isaac said to Jacob, please come closer so I can touch you, my son. Are you really my son Esau or not? So Jacob came close to his father Isaac, who touched him and said, the voice is the voice of Jacob, but the hands are the hands of Esau. Isaac did not recognize him, because his hands were hairy like those of his brother Esau. So he blessed him. And again he asked, are you really my son Esau? And he replied, I am. Serve me, said Isaac, and let me eat some of my son's game, so that I may bless you. Jacob brought it to him, and he ate, and then he brought him wine, and he drank. Then his father Isaac said to him, please come near me and kiss me, my son. So he came near and kissed him, and when Isaac smelled his clothing, he blessed him and said, the smell of my son is like the smell of a field that the Lord has blessed. May God give to you the dew of heaven and the richness of the earth, and abundance of grain and new wine. May people serve you and nations bow down to you. May you be the master of your brothers, and may the sons of your mother bow down to you. May those who curse you be cursed, and those who bless you be blessed. As soon as Isaac had finished blessing him, and Jacob had left his father's presence, his brother Esau returned from the hunt. He too made some tasty food, brought it to his father, and said to him, my father, sit up and eat of your son's game, so that you may bless me. But his father Isaac replied, "Who are you?" "I am Esau, your firstborn son," he answered. Isaac began to tremble violently and said, "Who was it then who hunted the game and brought it to me? Before you came in, I ate it all and blessed him, and indeed he will be blessed." When Isaac heard his father's words, he let out a loud and bitter cry and said to his father, "Bless me too, O my father." But Isaac replied, "Your brother came deceitfully and took your blessing." So Esau declared, "Is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has cheated me twice. He took my birthright, and now he's taken my blessing." Then he asked, "Haven't you saved a blessing for me?" But Isaac answered Esau, "Look, I have made him your master and given him all his relatives as servants. I have sustained him with grain and new wine. What is left that I can do for you, my son?" Esau said to his father, "Do you have only one blessing, my father? Bless me too, O my father." Then Esau wept aloud. His father Isaac answered him, "Behold, your dwelling place shall be away from the richness of the land, away from the dew of heaven above. You shall live by the sword and serve your brother. But when you rebel, you will tear his yoke from your neck." Esau held a grudge against Jacob because of the blessing his father had given him. And Esau said in his heart, "The days of mourning for my father are at hand, and then I will kill my brother Jacob." When the words of her older son Esau were relayed to Rebekah, she sent for her younger son Jacob and told him, "Look, your brother Esau has consoled himself by plotting to kill you. So now, my son, obey my voice and flee at once to my brother Laban in Haran. Stay with him for a while until your brother's fury subsides, until your brother's rage against you wanes and he forgets what you have done to him. Then I will send for you and bring you back from there. Why should I lose both of you in one day?" Then Rebekah said to Isaac, "I am weary of my life because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a Hittite wife from among them, what good is my life?" Okay.
Yeah, this is
All
this
right.
is an amazing chapter, and I'm just looking at the chat, and there's a lot of people that have the same question marks that most of us had when we read this for the first time, at least, about Jacob. He's incorrectly, in my opinion, called a deceiver by most, and we see here first off that is Rebecca's mother's idea, and she even said that let the guilt be upon me, and I just in the beginning when it says that Isaac is old and he's lost the majority of his eyesight, I even see that like spiritually speaking, he's not having the most clear vision in terms of who should actually get this blessing. Because I think you had a slide right before the summary that in Jubilees 19 it explains that both Abraham and Rebecca understood that Esau is not really disinterested. He says something along the lines that while Jacob learned to write, which is the term for learning the priesthood, Esau was out there learning warfare and how to hunt. So it was not even in his heart to do this.
Yeah. And as we see from this, not only is Isaac extremely powerful, but part of him blessing his son in this position of rulership and passing on the priesthood is Jacob now becoming that powerful as well. This is why he says to Esau, "You will be a servant to your brother now." And so this is fascinating because this is where someone's asking in the chat, why couldn't he bless Esau as well? It's because the blessing is for it to pass on the priesthood, which is a position of rulership and authority. So there can only be one. It's like the Highlander. There can only be one. So this is why it's important that it was such a big deal in Esau. But like you said, Abraham even noticed that Esau was not inclined to be a good priest, right? He was not inclined to be the one. He was not responsible enough. He was not dedicated to Yahweh enough. And Jacob was. And this is what's interesting, that I think, in Genesis, it introduces Esau and Jacob, and it just says Esau was a quiet man who stayed in tents. And you're like, well, dude, like that, you're telling me that's all he did? He's just in there with his Xbox in the tent all day long. Is that really all he did? Like, no, Jubilees kind of gives you a little bit extra information, how he was someone that was faithful to Rebecca, and he was a good-hearted person who also was learning to write, which means he was interested in, which you have to know how to read and write if you're going to be a good king, because you got to adjudicate, certain edicts or certain policies. You've got to deal with people that are foreigners. You're going to, you have to be able to expand your brain and learn, and you've got to learn the law of God, which gives you wisdom, right? And part of, like we've talked about in the past, part of the priesthood was they were tasked to be scribes, as well as knowing the law, teaching it faithfully to people, and ministering at an altar before the Lord. They also needed to be able to just copy the scrolls so they could pass them on to future generations. It was an important part of that function, of that job. And speaking of ministering before the Lord, did you notice, let me go to this this thing here. Let me go to the right verse.
Are you talking about when Isaac said that he can bless him before
So
Yahweh?
this is in verse 7. where he says, "Bring me some game and prepare me a tasty dish to eat, so that I may bless you in the presence of the Lord before I die." What do you think that means?
I think that an angel was there to testify that yes, Isaac did give this blessing to Jacob.
So, from what we discussed in previous weeks about how much this angel of the Lord is there overseeing the priesthood, this would make a lot of sense. What you're saying.
Yep.
Yeah. Real quick, before we get too far in the chat, there's people in the chat that have dropped a couple super chats. I just want to say thank you for that. I really appreciate it. So, yeah, I thought the same thing too when I read this, with kind of like refreshed eyes, if you will, after the past 3 or 4 weeks of seeing how much angelic interaction is constantly around Abraham and him administering the priesthood, and then Isaac and him administering the priesthood. So it would make perfect sense that if he's going to pass that extremely valuable position of authority, rulership, and ministering to Yahweh on to his son, that there would be an angel there to validate, to observe, to make sure that this is a witness, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, this is interesting. And this, if that's the case, doesn't this kind of put a whole new perspective on what goes down?
Yeah, because the angel never told Isaac that, yeah, this is not Esau. He was there fully aware of what was going on, and he kept his mouth shut, I assume. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Well, in fact, if I, without remember the exact verse in Jubilees 19, I want to say Abraham, when he was telling Rebekah that she needs to make sure Jacob gets the blessing, I want to say that he said that it's from the Lord, or that it's good that he get, I can't remember it, but we definitely know that that Jacob was chosen, by the father. But I want to say that Abraham was told by the father that Jacob was chosen. I can't remember the exact verse, but ultimately, if there's an angel of the Lord there observing this interaction and doesn't stop it, well, then that says a huge amount. Because even to me, this would make sure when Esau comes in and he says, "Don't you have a blessing for me? How's this? What's going on?" And then Isaac responds, I already blessed somebody, and he indeed will be blessed. So he could have at that point said, "Oh man, I made a mistake. I take that back." Right? Isaac still had, they would have still recognized Isaac's power at that point, right? But the reason why it was validated and sustained, and why Isaac didn't take it back, is because the Lord is validating what happened with an actual witness there.
Yeah.
So it from our perspective, reading along, it seems like, man, Jacob and Rebekah, they kind of had this plot to deceive and steal the authority, right? Steal the priesthood position. But then you get kind of the extra parallel accounts of this same event. You realize that, Abraham encouraged this because he saw in Esau's heart, he saw that Isaac's heart favored Esau, even though Esau was not right for the priesthood, and that was going to be a problem. So
exactly,
it's interesting because you got like how much, like you mentioned at the beginning of chapter 26, you mentioned how much respect Abraham is given.
Yeah.
Like every time they mention the new blessing to the generations past Abraham, they always reference it back to Abraham. So how interesting that in this moment, Abraham's observation of these things is validated by the angel of the Lord there to oversee this transition of the priesthood, and Esau's behavior and Isaac's misjudgment in regards to which brother should get this is also validating Abraham's observation, right? So all this is kind of like when it takes some study. This conversation, this topic takes some study to kind of put all these pieces together and see that there's a lot more going on behind the scenes, and to understand what is actually happening in this moment where Jacob is stepping before his father Isaac to get this blessing, and what that blessing means as far as the priesthood, how that blessing is passed on and validated as far as the angel of the presence there to witness this. I just think it's amazing, and it seems to just bring so much more common sense reality to the story than just saying, "Oh, looks like you tricked me. Oh, well, too bad for you, Esau."
It seems like Isaac came to his senses too when Esau actually came in later, and he said he will be blessed. Like he understood, like, okay, it seems like the angel here wants Jacob to receive it. So, yeah.
So we get this question all the time. All the time I get this question. Someone's asking right now in the question, so does that mean lying is permitted? Of course not. This is in Leviticus chapter 19, I believe. I think it's verse 11. We should not lie or deal unjustly with our brethren. Again, this is why Jacob tells Rebekah, "Hey, man, I'm gonna be a deceiver if I get caught doing this." Right.
Mm.
And this is all being done in the presence of someone that can't be deceived, this angel of
Yeah.
the presence, right? So it's kind of interesting to see that, like you're saying, that Isaac even comes to the realization and allows this to stand, because he realizes this was from the Lord, because the Lord was there overseeing it and allowed this to happen. You see what I mean?
Yep.
Otherwise, if he didn't want this to happen, I'm pretty sure the angel would have spoken up or something bad would have happened to Jacob.
Yeah,
See what I mean?
exactly.
So yes, he's definitely has to trick. And I know a lot of people say, well, this is a lie. He tells him that he's Esau. He's his firstborn son. And he's like, are you sure? He asked him like 4 or 5 times, right? Are you sure you're Esau? You know, it's almost like Isaac kind of is like picking up on something here.
Yeah.
You know, he's definitely being tipped off that something's not right here. He wouldn't even have to ask. He even says the voice is the voice of Jacob, but his hands are the hands of Esau. So what do you think about that?
I do think that, like, since Isaac was the one that had the authority to pass down the blessing of the priesthood, they had to respect it. But everyone else, especially Abraham and Rebekah, since they saw that, you know, this should go to Jacob, and even he's the one that's been training for it and has that desire. We even see in Jubilees chapter 25, I think it's verse 1-7, where Esau is sort of like trying to get Jacob to marry the sisters of his wives. Like, come on, bro, you know, go ahead and be wicked like me. But Jacob is just standing firmly for righteousness and knowing that he has to do what's right. And I think Isaac probably had multiple conversations with his wife, you know, about, you know, you should not give this to Esau. Esau is, you know, out in the wilds just hunting and doing whatever pleases him instead of actually doing what's right. And I think Isaac had suspicions. Like, I have this question when he says that Rebekah took the skin of the goats, and I was sort of looking up how how long does it take to curate skin after you've killed an animal. And I don't know, sounds like it would have been a pretty smelly experience for both Isaac and Jacob if he took the fresh skins from the goats. I can't really wrap my head around that one, but I'm pretty sure that Isaac had a hint, an inkling. And he sort of played along when he said, this is the smell of my son, you know, the smell of the wild fields that Yah has blessed. But I'm not sure. It's just speculation on my part.
Yeah. So there's a couple people in the chat today. They're really struggling with this passage, and this is great. This is why we want to talk about it, right? We want to discuss the ins and outs, read it aloud. I just want to encourage everyone in the chat, if you just be considerate of all the details that we're bringing into this story. This is why I'm bringing them up. This is why we're talking about them at great length, right? We could spend 5 minutes on this chapter and move on, but instead we're willing to take the time to talk about all these things. So what we've said so far is a quick recap as far as the story. This is why, again, without making this an entire separate 2-hour video, we have to do our best to try to recap with quick summation the events, the details that are in Genesis, as well as paralleled in Jubilees, which is the parallel account to Genesis. So this is why on the slides we have them in footnotes as far as what the parallel accounts are. So I would encourage folks to go read Jubilees 19-27 so that you can get a better, fuller understanding of all the details going into this. One of the things to keep in mind is that Abraham is the one who picked up and discerned, whether from the Lord or from his own observation, that Isaac was going to do the wrong thing. Think about that for a minute. A lot of people are frustrated because they're thinking, well, wait a minute, is Jacob sinning because he went in there and deceived? Or is Rebekah, how can she be saying to Jacob that she'll take the blame if she's telling Jacob to do the one to sin and lie to Isaac? Abraham told Rebekah to do this. Not this wasn't just Rebekah's own idea. She's following the instruction of Abraham. Abraham explains why he tells Rebekah to do this and says Isaac is going to make the wrong choice because he's already seen a character flaw within Isaac as far as him favoring a son who's not righteous because it's his firstborn son and he loves him. You see what I mean? This is a pitfall, if you will. This is a character flaw that any good father can fall into. You have an abundance of love for your son. And even when they are doing the wrong thing and not living according to the ways of the Father, you still you go out of your way and you sometimes can become an enabler to that person. And had Isaac given Esau all this money, wealth, and power, he would have definitely been enabling unrighteousness in the land. And this would have been a horrible event. The guy's already going into marital union with the Canaanites when he shouldn't have. So the point is, I understand what this text says, but there's more than just, this is why we look at context. We look at the surrounding passages before and after, and parallel passages from other books that retell the same events. And when we put all those together, we see that Jacob is following Isaac or Rebekah's instruction to do this. Rebekah is following Abraham's instructions to do this. Abraham is doing this in a roundabout way because Isaac is showing the propensity that he's not going to act righteously in this decision. And this entire event is overseen by an angel of the Lord there, who gives his blessing and his yes and his verification, his check mark on this event for Jacob to receive the blessing. So on one hand, someone could say that this was Isaac is the victim of multiple people conspiring against him to trick him. On the other hand, you could say Abraham is dealing with his son's character flaw in the best way he knows how in order to save face for Isaac and to respect him. You remember we talked about love several portions ago. We talked about love covers a multitude of sins. Mm-hmm. So this is, according to Jubilees, and him introducing the idea to Rebekah for this event to make sure Jacob gets the blessing that Abraham had, the priesthood. This is Abraham dealing with his son Isaac in a way that's most loving and gentle, because Isaac is the supreme authority in this situation. Abraham's, by the time this event takes place, Abraham's already dead. Mm. So it's not like Abraham's the great grandfather in the background just trying to play puppet master. No, he actually saw this coming before he even died. Mm. And he tells Rebekah, hey, make sure Jacob gets this blessing and not Esau. Esau's not right for it. But I know that Isaac is going to favor Esau regardless and try to give it to him. So this is a situation where Abraham in his wisdom, validated by the events of the father, is trying to make sure that this priesthood responsibility, power, and blessing gets passed on to the right heart who can obtain it properly. And unfortunately, this has to be done in spite of the current leadership's faulty heart on this matter, if that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So it's not a black and white situation by far. It's a sticky one. There's a lot of details here. There's a lot to consider. But just keep in mind that this is why I wanted to point out in this passage here in verse 7 that the angel of the Lord is overseeing all this. So it's interesting.
Yeah. And we even see that with Rebekah getting the information that Esau wants to kill Jacob in a dream, seems that even it's Yah's best interest to protect Jacob. So he's still endorsing that Jacob survives and goes and doesn't fight. And I was wondering about the part
the father is protecting Jacob, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, because that's also, by the way, for the audience listening, that's in the Jubilees parallel account. It just as we read right here. Hannibal, just to give them a little bit of context to what you're referring to. Verse 42, where it says the words of her older son Esau were relayed to Rebekah. Well, that's very vague. Who relayed them? Right? Well, it says in Jubilees that she had a dream, and in her dream she was told as a warning, hey, Esau's planning to kill Jacob. You need to deal with this. So that's what Hannibal's referring to, guys.
We also see in verse 45 that Rebekah says, why should I lose both of you in one day? And I had a question mark about that before I read the Jubilees portion, because we see in Jubilees 27 verse 4 and 5 that when Rebekah tells Jacob that your brother wants to kill you, he said, that's fine. If he comes after me, I'll kill him first. So he's about to self-defense. And I believe that if it were Esau that were to overtake and kill Jacob first, then according to, I think it's Exodus 21 verse 12 to 14 about the law, that then you have to kill Esau also because of what he did. So I think that's what Rebekah means by she would lose both her sons if that were to happen.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. Let me see here. What do we finish this? While Esau's hunting, Rebekah instructs Jacob to dress Esau and serve Isaac the game meat and receive the blessing. Jacob approaches Esau with the meal and receives the blessing from him. Esau returns from hunting and brings in the meal to Isaac, only to discover the blessing was already given to his brother Jacob. Esau is furious and vows to kill Jacob after Isaac dies, and Esau's murderous intent is revealed to Rebekah in a dream. she instructs Jacob to flee to Laban and Haran to find a wife and escape Esau's wrath. And so this is interesting how it's posed again. There's a lot more detail in the parallel account in Jubilees, where this conversation where Rebecca in Genesis, all we see is Rebecca is concerned. It kind of jumps around, like the context kind of jumps around in this last verse here. Verse 46, Rebecca says to Isaac, I'm weary of my life because of these Hittite women. If Jacob takes a Hittite wife from among them, what good is my life? So we don't get like the conversation that from 45 to 46 is very different. These are two different conversations.
Yeah.
So she doesn't respond to she's not adding to the conversation of Esau trying to kill Jacob with Jacob's marital options in the land, right? Like those two are wholly unrelated. Thankfully, we have a parallel account in Jubilees that gives us a lot more detail. And in that parallel account, there's like several verses in there that explain why Rebecca says this to Isaac. And there's actually a conversation with Jacob between Genesis 27:45 and 27:46 that she's telling Jacob, look, Esau's trying to kill you. So here's what you're going to do. You're going to go to Laban, my uncle Laban's house, or my brother Laban's house. And you're going to go and stay there to avoid the wrath of Esau. And then she goes to Isaac and then says to Isaac, she doesn't tell Isaac that Esau wants to kill Jacob. She's still trying to protect Isaac, which is interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because apparently they realize that Isaac is not going to deal with Esau as he deserves. This is the way as a parent, and watching parents all my life, some of them being weak with their kids and some of them being strong with their kids. And between Abraham and Isaac's observation between Abraham and Rebecca's observation of Isaac and how he treats and favors Esau, it seems like he's a pushover for Esau. And Esau can just, he's not being reprimanded properly. So Rebecca is trying to save Jacob. She knows that Esau is going to kill him. And she's like, go to my brother Laban's house. And then she goes to Isaac and says to Isaac, hey, I'm worried about Jacob's marital options where we live. What if he went to Haran? There's probably better marital options from our extended family up there. Isaac agrees. And then Isaac sends Jacob as an official, father of the family, the elder of the family, sends Jacob up to Laban's house up there to try to find a wife. So that way it's validated by both parents. Isaac still retains his honor as far as he made the decision for his son to leave their household and go to see their extended family. You know what I'm saying? So it's like I guess what I'm trying to get at, guys, is Rebecca's been put in a very unique position, like a rock and a hard place here, because she has this extremely wise and powerful, righteous prophet of God, Abraham, tell her at one point in her life and put this incredible responsibility on her to finesse this situation so that the right person gets the priesthood, and also to retain Isaac's honor and allow him to continue to be in a place to make decisions and feel validated in those decisions as the elder of the family and the leader of that family. So I guess what I'm so impressed with in this chapter is Rebecca's heart to serve Isaac in a way that doesn't neuter him.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, she was very
she could have easily pulled the trump card and said, Abraham told me to do this.
Exactly. So she's preserving his honor also, and really respecting his authority. Yeah.
So I guess she's put in a rock and a hard place, like I said, because she has to do this to keep the honor of Isaac intact, but also carry this out, which means it gets a little sticky. And I think that this is, some people are asking in the chat, they're like, well, isn't this just lying? I'm like, hey, it's told you by a prophet of the Lord and validated by an angel of the Lord to do this so that Isaac can make the right decision. So I guess what I'm trying to say is the whole point of deceiving Isaac. And I kind of question whether he was truly deceived or not by the end of the story. You know what I mean? But if we just take the text at face value, I would say that there's a lot of circumstances going on in this story so that Rebecca can do this extremely difficult task and keep everybody alive while she does it.
Yeah.
Right. Because she's also taking that gamble of thinking, well, if Abraham's wrong, then I'm going to send you in before this extremely powerful angel. that's got to be a fearsome moment as well, in my opinion.
Mhm.
So to me, it's like this is a really tough situation as far as the father through Abraham is observing Esau, or Isaac is got a character flaw in this regard, and he's going to make a
Mhm.
bad decision coming up. So we've got to do this to try to allow him to retain his honor, but also help him make the right decision. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. It's interesting.
Yeah. We especially we see Abraham entrusting this mission to Rebecca, a woman, and she's doing something very mighty and courageous in this situation.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're right. Because if Isaac could have discovered, he could have, maybe touched Jacob's hands too much, right, and pulled off the skins, right? So he realized it wasn't true, and he was found out, and like Jacob was worried, he was revealed as a deceiver. And then Jacob could have just said, well, I was put up to it by my mom, right? Well, then Rebecca could be in just as much deadly trouble as Jacob was. So yeah, she's definitely taking some risk. So, all right, brother. Is there anything else in this chapter you want to cover?
No, not really.
Okay. Well, guys, we would like to hear from you. We talked about quite a few things in this chapter, and but we would like to hear from you as far as, have you studied the parallel account of Jubilees 19? Tell us in the comments below. Have you realized that there's more to this story that we reviewed today, with how Rebecca sends Jacob before Isaac to get this blessing? And if you have, what are your thoughts on it? Tell us in the live chat. Tell us in the comments below. We would love to hear from you. Okay. But I'm going to run on to 28 if there's nothing else.
Let's do it.
Okay. All right. Here you are, brother.
Yeah. Genesis chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Do not take a wife from the Canaanite women, he commanded. Go at once to Padan Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel, and take a wife from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, so that you may become a company of peoples, and may give you the blessing of Abraham to you and your descendants, so that you may possess the land where you dwell as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham. So Isaac sent Jacob to Padan Aram, to Laban son of Bethuel, the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and sent him to Padan Aram to take a wife there, commanding him, do not marry a Canaanite woman, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and gone to Padan Aram. And seeing that his father Isaac disapproved of the Canaanite women, Esau went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth, the daughter of Abraham's son Ishmael, in addition to the wives he already had. Meanwhile, Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. On reaching a certain place, he spent the night there because the sun had set, and taking one of the stones from that place, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. And Jacob had a dream about a ladder that rested on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven. And God's angels were going up and down the ladder. And there at the top, Yahweh was standing and saying, I am Yahweh, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I give you and your descendants the land on which you now lie. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and the east and north and south. All the families of the earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. Look, I am with you, and I will watch over you wherever you go. And I will bring you back to this land, for I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you. When Jacob woke up, he thought, surely Yahweh is in this place, and I was unaware of it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone that he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar. He poured oil on top of it, and he called that place Bethel, though previously the city had been named Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying, if God be with me and watch over me on this journey, and if he will provide me with food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I may return safely to my father's house, then Yahweh will be my God. And this stone I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will surely give you a tenth.
All right. Thank you, brother. Awesome.
Yeah.
So it was formerly called Luz, this place that he goes to on his travels. So just for people that are in the audience listening, like he's going up, he's going north from where he was with his father Isaac, and he's going to go north. He's going to pass this place called Luz, also Bethel. He's going to pass this on the way and stay overnight here because he's got quite a journey to go, probably another 2 or 3 days journey to go. And he stays here and he has his dream, and he's like, this is the gate of heaven.
Yeah.
So does that mean that all this angelic activity was already happening at this location?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. There is, some speculation. I think you previously mentioned this on this broadcast, that this place was probably maybe where the Garden of Eden was before, and that this place, even after this time with Jacob, this place still has some significance. So, I wonder if this gate of heaven that he's talking about is one of the 7 gates that we see mentioned in the flood account and in the book of Enoch.
Yeah, it's possible. As far as having a dual nature within that gate, to either let water in or to be a point of access, it's possible. But yeah, I just think it's interesting that he's realizing all this activity that's happening here. So he wants to rename this place. So that means whoever lived there already didn't know all this activity was happening here.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Is it still happening there today?
That's a good question.
Guys, this is over. Like, we can get to this place today.
Yeah.
I
had that thought as I was reading this portion. Of course, I wanted to go to Israel, and I've never been there, but just to see these historical landmarks and places like this, because of course you have, one of my wishes is to, of course, have angelic interaction on this side of the resurrection and be aware of it happening. So I don't know if that would increase your odds of that happening if you were to go there, and who knows?
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah.
And what possibly other places around the earth are their points where angels come down to do their jobs, to the peoples and the nations on the earth that we don't know about. I guess what's interesting to me about this is that it's just Jacob gets, for just a moment, he gets a glimpse of the stuff that happens on a daily basis. And I just think it's fascinating. Actually, it's truly, truly fascinating. Let me pull this up real quick. So Genesis 28, it opens up, without telling Isaac of Esau's murderous intent toward Jacob, Rebekah encourages her husband Isaac to send Jacob to Laban's house to take a wife from their extended family up there. So Esau, he saw Isaac's disapproval of his Hittite wives by his parents, so he took an additional wife from Ishmael's descendants. So it's interesting. What did you think about this? Because it seems almost as if I could just speculate, because the text doesn't tell us, it just seems as if Esau is trying at this point to somehow get into the good graces of his parents, because he's realizing like his behavior led to him not getting the blessing, the money, the power, the wealth. And so it's almost like he's trying to like course correct a little bit. What do you think?
Yeah, I have that speculation too, suspicion, but I think he's going at it from the wrong angle. Maybe there's some other things he should address first before just, let me just add another wife and hope that my parents are good with it. Because let's say even if his third wife were not one that brought a lot of despair to Rebekah and Isaac, you still have those 2 wives that are a problem. So I don't really know how that's going to help.
Yeah, that's right. And so putting last chapter and this chapter together with Esau's mindset, right? He's thinking Isaac's going to die soon. That's why he says the days of Isaac's mourning are, at hand, basically. Isaac's going to die soon. And then after Isaac dies, Esau plans to kill Jacob. But in the meantime, he's receiving flack from his parents, Isaac and Rebekah, because of his marital choices with the Hittite women. And his mother disapproves of the women so much that she wants to send Jacob hundreds of miles away to live with another family member to find a wife from there, after Jacob has received the blessing for the power, the honor, the money, all that kind of stuff, right? So isn't this interesting that from the mindset of Esau, he's like, all right, now the guy that I want to kill and take over his position of authority has been moved away, so now I don't know what's going to happen of him, right? And he's going to our family's house, Laban, and they have money and power too. So like, I don't want to, like, he would have to now. He knows that if Jacob is going to, like the culture of that day, if Jacob is going to go live with Laban, he's going to go serve Laban and be under Laban's authority now. So now he's going to have to deal with Laban if he wants to go kill Jacob.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah.
So there's like all these extra protection things being added to Jacob, not just getting away from him geographically, putting some physical distance between them, but also now he's under someone else's authority. I mean, we're going to read about this next week, right? As Jacob has to leave Laban's authority suddenly because he's being abused. But it's very interesting because Esau's definitely not going to get his way right? He wants to be patient because he fears Isaac.
Yep.
But then at the same time, because he has to be patient, now Jacob is getting removed out of his grasp.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. Like the father's just good, he's just a masterful chess player,
Exactly.
And Esau, he thinks it's funny because Esau definitely did not tell Rebekah or Isaac he plans to kill Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
The father revealed that to Rebekah supernaturally.
Mm-hmm.
So think about this, guys, for all of you out there that, the whole secret sins idea. Think like I'm not saying that everybody hasn't done something that they don't want being known, but if it's going to, like in this case, Esau's secret desire, his secret sin, planning to kill Jacob, which has now become the Lord's anointed, the Lord is going to now step in and make his plans known so that his sins are revealed to defend. And meanwhile, Esau doesn't know that Rebekah knows this. She just thinks, oh, well, my mom and dad are sending Jacob to go find a wife amongst our extended family.
Yeah.
See how that works? Like that's wild to me because like Esau thinks he's slick. He thinks he's smart. Like he's going to be able to get away with planning this overthrow, if you will, of the authority given to Jacob, When the father's like, nah, bro, I know exactly what you're thinking. And I'm already working behind the scenes to not let you accomplish your evil deeds. So just be encouraged, guys. I know that we see, especially in this modern time, we see so many unrighteous rulers plotting against their own people in their countries with improper forces of medical tyranny as well as political tyranny in different ways. They're trying to enforce a plan that is basically communism worldwide, and they're trying to do this by force through legislation and regulation, through the manipulation of markets, through medical tyranny, and the people are praying right now in many different countries for the Father to step in and stop this. I just want you to be encouraged if you're listening out there. He knows the hearts of everyone. He knows the minds of these wicked rulers who are trying to enforce this and disrupt everyone's life and economy and put them into a form of subjugation. Now, Hannibal, you're in Sweden, right?
Yep. In Sweden.
Have you guys faced some unique changes in the last year and a half?
Well, surprisingly enough, Sweden, for being a socialistic country, we've had remarkably few amount of restrictions. We didn't have any lockdown, no mask mandate, and nothing really going on. But I think in terms of freedom for the general individual in Sweden, we're at a pretty low level. So I think the mindset is pretty much, they're already submissive. So there's nothing really to, there's no need to push them down any further. But now we're seeing it being expanded all throughout Europe. The mandates and whatever. But just for everyone that's listening, just be encouraged. When we're reading this Torah portion, know that Yah has everything under control, and just all your anxiety, throw it on him, because he's faithful to take it and to help you through that situation. You see, even me in Sweden, you guys in America might think that, I don't have any liberties to begin with, right? But in Yah, I am so free that I don't have any anxiety about what could come around the corner. So just be encouraged.
Thank you, brother. Appreciate that. Yeah, guys, be encouraged. The Father knows what's going on. He's actively working to stop evil people all the time. He's actively working. Otherwise, the world would already be dead. So he's actively, it's a constant spiritual battle that is going on around us. But guys, this is interesting. We see while traveling to Haran, Jacob stayed the night at Luz, and Yahweh gave him a dream of angels moving up and down a ladder to heaven above, and the Lord at the top of the ladder, reaffirming the covenant to him that was also made with Abraham and Isaac. So this is fascinating because in addition to seeing this incredible vision of these angels going about their daily business and moving around, we have the Lord. Now, what do we think? Is this a pre-incarnate Yeshua? Is this Yahweh himself? What do we think?
I believe it's an angel.
Maybe an angel that he's referring to as the Lord, and the translator just capitalized that L.
I think it's the concept of agency once again, that we have this representative of the Father, knowing that we can't see him in this flesh and live, and there's also prophecies about the Messiah being concealed until it was his time to appear. So I don't.
Yeah. So if this wasn't, it would be a little more consistent, I guess, is what I think I'm hearing from you, that with everything that we've read about how much angelic interaction is, and the Lord being represented by angels in multiple, both in real life interactions as well as in visions and dreams.
Exactly.
It would make a lot of sense with consistency to say this was an angel as well. But
Mhm.
we do have like visions from Enoch and Daniel, where in a vision, in a dream, they see
That's right.
Yahweh, the Almighty,
Mhm.
and don't die because it's not real, right? It's a vision, it's a dream.
Like
So
Isaiah chapter 6.
yeah, and also Isaiah, he sees Ezekiel, right? So
Yep.
there it is possible, but I would say, as far as consistency of the text, it's probably in another angel that is the one that's been leading him, guiding him, speaking to him on a constant basis, that kind of thing. Especially if he's the one that's going to be taking over the priesthood. So
Now, in terms of the creation model, when Jacob is looking up in his dream and seeing through the gate of heaven, what level do you think he's looking at? If you were to speculate, do you think he's seeing all the way up to the top, where he could actually be seeing the Father if he's in the Spirit?
Well, let's look at the text real quick.
Yeah.
So it says here, this is going to be in verse 12. It says, Jacob had a dream about a ladder that rested on the earth with its top reaching up to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So that would say it's just it's underneath the first layer, in my understanding.
Yeah.
And these are the angels coming and going inside our enclosure, underneath our firmament. So I don't personally, from the text, delete my answer to the question. My understanding would be he's not seeing into multiple layers.
Mm-hmm.
He's just seeing all the interaction happening between the ground and the firmament above us, and how they're coming and going.
Yeah, and then I do think it makes sense, if we want to be consistent, that it is actually an angel that is representing the Father then, if we were to assume that the Father didn't come down for that specific moment to the first firmament layer.
Yeah, but it's a great question. Yeah, because I mean, like we see Levi and his prophecy that he was, or his vision he was given, he saw it in multiple layers. Same thing with Abraham and the Apocalypse of Abraham. So yeah, it's a great question. All right, let me see here. What else? Real quick, we'll finish up this summary and get to our companion passages. Jacob names that place Bethel, which I believe means the house of God, right?
Yep.
So that's one of the reasons why I theorized this was the former location of the Garden of Eden.
Mm-hmm.
That the garden was smaller, this geographical area, obviously not just this specific little spot where he stopped and had a dream, but the general geographical area. Because I believe, as I've mentioned in multiple videos, that the garden is a walled-off structure. It was its own kingdom, and within it, it had multiple things, as various scriptures describe. And it was encompassing a specific location within what we know today as the territory of Israel or Judea, and this is where Bethel is placed. So this is why I think it's interesting. There's all this angelic activity, and Jacob comes to this unique realization and kind of freaks out. He gets really excited. And he's like, this is the house of God. This is the gate of heaven. He gets all excited. So I think it's almost as if he's coming to it's a definitely, let me say it like this. It's definitely a grander reaction and realization than Jacob's growing up with Esau and this angel of the presence being present in their life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly.
You see what I mean? So there's something very significant about this place. Jacob sets up a stone to mark the event, location, and promises given to give a tenth to Yahweh from whatever Yahweh blesses him with, if he keeps him safe on his journey. So Jacob is how should I say this? Jacob is calling upon the Father to make sure that the terms of the covenant are in place. So what I mean by that, Hannibal, is he's like, look, I'm gonna set this stone here because this amazing event happened. Right. I'm sure it was kind of like a big pillar, honestly, but I'm gonna set this stone here to mark the event and the occasion. And I'm going to do the covenant behavior, which is I'll give you a tenth if you just keep me safe on this journey and get me back home. Because he doesn't know he's going to be at Laban's house for 20 years yet. We're going to see that in the next week. He doesn't know how long he's going to be there.
I have a speculation because in the previous chapter where Isaac's saying that, I'm old and my eyesight has grown dim and I don't know when I'm going to die.
That's right.
And then, with you saying that he didn't know that he's going to spend 2 decades with Laban. And in the last part of verse 22 in chapter 28, where it says, I will give you a tenth if you help me get back home. It sounds like he's saying, if you help me get back home safe, then when I can step into my priesthood, then I'll be doing the covenant by giving you a tenth, which is a part of the duties for the priests.
Well, yeah, in addition to that, whomever he would be, because remember in Genesis 35, he goes back to Bethel and has his
Yeah.
whole family, consecrate themselves and get ready. Then he goes back to Bethel to give offering. And so I think that in addition to Jacob, remember we have these other priests that are running around that are descendants from the Melchizedek order that have descendants of Eber. So that's where I think that he can still fulfill the tithe of his first fruits, if you will. He can still fulfill that throughout his life. He doesn't know he's about to be gone for 2 decades. But what I mean by calling the terms of the covenant to mind in this prayer to Yahweh is that in the terms of the covenant, as we see in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 28 and 29, that if you do the covenant, Yahweh will protect you also, physically protect you also.
Yeah.
So he's calling upon that promise for physical protection because he knows that Esau wants to kill him and he's going on a journey. I don't know if he's ever left his house before this moment. I don't know how far he's traveled away from his family, and he's definitely by himself, So anyway, just a thought.
Yep.
So let me go back here and we'll go to our next companion passage where we're going to be looking at 1 Samuel 15 and 16. So I think was it my turn?
I think it's your turn, yeah.
My turn? Okay. All right, guys. So 1 Samuel 15, 1-4 says, Then Samuel said to Saul, The Lord sent me to anoint you king over his people Israel. Now therefore listen to the words of the Lord. This is what the Lord of hosts says. I witnessed what the Amalekites did to the Israelites when they ambushed them on their way up from Egypt. Now go and attack the Amalekites and devote to destruction all that belongs to them. Do not spare them, but put to death men and women, children and infants, oxen and sheep, camels and donkeys. So Saul summoned the troops and numbered them at Telaim, 200,000 foot soldiers and 10,000 men of Judah. Saul came to the city of Amalek and lay in wait in the valley. He warned the Kenites, Since you showed kindness to all the Israelites when they came up out of Egypt, go on and get away from the Amalekites. Otherwise, I will sweep you away with them. So the Kenites moved away from the Amalekites, and then Saul struck down the Amalekites all the way from Havilah to Shur, which is east of Egypt. He captured Agag, king of Amalek, alive, but devoted all the others to destruction with the sword. Then the word of the Lord came to Samuel, saying, I regret that I've made Saul king, for he has turned away from following me, and he has not carried out my instructions. And Samuel was distressed and cried out to the Lord all that night. Early in the morning, Samuel got up to confront Saul, but he was told, Saul has gone to Carmel, and behold, he has set up a monument for himself and has turned and gone down to Gilgal. When Samuel reached him, Saul said to him, May the Lord bless you. I've carried out the Lord's instructions. But Samuel replied, Then what is this bleating of sheep and lowing of cattle that I hear? Saul answered, The troops brought them from the Amalekites. They spared the best sheep and cattle to sacrifice to the Lord your God, but the rest we devoted to destruction. Stop! Exclaimed Samuel. Let me tell you what the Lord said to me last night. Tell me, Saul replied. Samuel said, Although you were once small in your own eyes, you have not become the head of the tribes of Israel. Have you not become the head of the tribes of Israel? The Lord anointed you king over Israel and sent you on a mission, saying, Go and devote to destruction the sinful Amalekites. Fight against them until you have wiped them out. So why did you not obey the Lord? Why do you rush upon the plunder and do evil in the sight of the Lord? But I did obey the Lord, Saul replied. I went on the mission that the Lord gave me. I brought back Agag, king of Amalek, and I devoted the Amalekites to destruction. The troops took the sheep and cattle from the plunder, the best of the things devoted to destruction, in order to sacrifice them to the Lord your God at Gilgal. But Samuel declared, Does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience to his voice? Behold, obedience is better than sacrifice, and attentiveness is better than the fat of the rams. For rebellion is like the sin of divination, and arrogance is like the wickedness of idolatry. Because you have rejected the word of the Lord, he has rejected you as king. Then Saul said to Samuel, I have sinned. I transgressed the Lord's commandment and your instructions, because I feared the people and obeyed their voice. Now, therefore, please forgive my sin and return with me so I can worship the Lord. I will not return with you, Samuel replied, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and he has rejected you as king over Israel. Samuel turned to go. Saul grabbed the hem of his robe, and it tore. So Samuel said to him, The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today, and has given it to your neighbor who is better than you. Moreover, the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he's not a man that he should change his mind. I have sinned, Saul replied. Please honor me now before the elders of my people and before Israel. Come back with me so that I may worship the Lord your God. So Samuel went back with Saul, and Saul worshiped the Lord. Then Samuel said, Bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites. Agag came to him cheerfully, for he thought, surely the bitterness of death is past. But Samuel declared, as your sword has made women childless, so your mother will be childless among women. And Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Then Samuel went to Ramah, but Saul went up to his home in Gibeah of Saul. And to the day of his death, Samuel never again visited Saul. Samuel mourned for Saul, and the Lord regretted that he made Saul king over Israel.
Yeah.
This is a wild chapter.
It's a really intense one.
It really is. So there's quite a few things in here that I wanted to kind of go over, just to say that there's so much to break down and dissect. But did you pick up that the reason why the Lord and Samuel were so upset with Saul?
Yeah, because, well, he didn't fulfill the instruction to devote everything to kill everything, pretty much. And like he said, that he was afraid of the people. And what I speculate then is that the men that went to him to war probably told Saul, why should we kill all these sheep and cattle? Let us save the best ones and have, peace offerings to Yah, because that's the offerings that they can also partake in. They were probably wanted to, fulfill the desires of the flesh. They wanted to eat meat, and they thought, we've been fighting for so long. We deserve, a good barbecue. And I think that's the wickedness, not only showing a character flaw in Saul, but also, people, we humans, me included, right? We can sort of make excuses for ourselves that we're actually doing something righteous, but we only want to satisfy our fleshly desires, so to speak. This is a prime example of that.
Yeah, because if you have a king that can be so easily swayed by your forces that you're supposed to be commanding, we got problems.
Yeah.
And that's what is revealed here within Saul. And also, did you see in the very beginning, the first few verses, when the guy comes to tell Samuel what Saul was doing, he says Saul set up an image to himself. He set up what does he say? Let me go find the exact wording here. It says
it's in verse 12, right?
Verse 12.
He has gone to Carmel, and behold, he has set up a monument for himself, and has turned and gone down to Gilgal. So, and I'm like, why a monument? Is this like something because he had a victorious? I don't understand why he would do that.
What is it with kings trying to set up monuments to themselves? Like, it's amazing to me. It's like, I did this, look at this carving of me. It's just when in reality, monuments just get defamed, defaced, they get spray painted, they get, people throw rocks at them. Someone could have came along later and just hacked down this monument in a day. They're just ridiculous waste of time. But it's just something about the heart of those who are out of alignment with Yahweh's heart, especially as a ruling king who's a commander of an army. They struggle with all these issues that we're seeing Saul struggle with here. But there's so Samuel is really grieving with this whole idea of Saul not fulfilling the requirement for his heart to be devoted to Yahweh. Has to call him out, and this is what I love about this passage, is where he tells him, like, let me go back to it real quick. I think it's in verse 22 here, where he says, Samuel declared, does the Lord delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices as much as in obedience to his voice? So Saul tries to play this off and be like, hey man, we sacrifice to the Lord.
Yeah.
What do you want from us? He's like, well, not only was that not the instruction, what priest was there? Was it, exactly. Did he have priests with him? Like, what are you even doing the sacrifice properly? So not only did he not obey the actual instruction, but he's trying to cover it up by playing church. And that's the crazy part, that Saul's calling out this hypocrisy, this duplicity, and just being like, bro, the Father did not ask you to do this. And you're not getting any points by doing this. You're actually losing points because he didn't ask you to do this. So he's like, look, because Saul thinks, well, as long as I go through the motions of doing a sacrifice, it'll be fine. And Saul's trying to remind him, look, burnt offerings and sacrifices is, yes, those are commanded in the law of God. Yes, it's what you would do in a lot of those occasions for a peace offering out of thanks for helping you win the battle. But in this occasion, if it contradicts what he plainly told you, then it's not good. right?
Exactly.
So he's just trying to say, look, man, he just wants you to be obedient above all, and instead of you trying to play church and think that you can smooth over God in spite of your own inclinations and rebellious attitude, like just do what he says and you'll be fine. So it's such an interesting parallel, a dynamic, I should say, between Saul and Samuel, where Samuel's just like, he's that prophet that's trusted to do whatever he's told.
Yeah.
And here he's having to deal with people that are trying to they're trying to color within the lines, but they truly don't like they don't truly not in agreement with the picture that's being painted.
Yeah.
So therefore they're just trying to do what they want, but still stay within the lines. And it's just, it's not the heart the Father wants. What else stuck out to you in this chapter that you talked about?
Well, of course, the part about Saul holding on to the hem of his garment and it tearing. But just to go back a few verses, like the way I played out in my head is in verse 13, when Samuel reached him, Saul said to him, "May Yahweh bless you. I have carried out Yahweh's instruction." I mean, that is so bold and so insane. And I just played out them having a huge barbecue. Saul still has like glazed fat on his fingers. He's licking at it like, "Oh, shalom, Samuel. May Yah bless you." And he's fooled himself so deeply that he thinks that surely this prophet will be happy about me doing what I've done. And I mean, it's just wickedness. I mean, we're all susceptible to it. And
I mean, clearly with people realizing that he didn't do what was instructed, they had to come back and tell Samuel.
Yeah.
So this is so the people around him can see clearly that he's deluding himself. And when finally faced with the truth, he admits, "Yeah, I feared the people. Yeah, I have transgressed." And so, but I agree with you. Like, I can see that moment where I've known people like this in my life, where they 100% know that they're in the wrong, but they try this like politician bravado to where they're like, yeah, that's fine. Come on, be with us. They're just trying to like soothe it over and just act like there's nothing wrong when there's something wrong here. And and also this unique idea, if you will, that okay, let me put it like this. When I was, tell me if you had this experience when you were a kid in school. When I was a kid in school, I probably was like second or third grade. And I remember so clearly that the teacher came in one day and she handed us this piece of paper that had like 30 questions on it. And she said, "All right, everybody, I want you to take, put everything away in your desk and just have this piece of paper in front of you and take out your pencils. And I want you to do what's on this paper. Do what you're told on this paper." And so all the kids just immediately start writing and answering all the questions. Very easy questions, right? Like, what is the subject? What is 2 + 2? What is, just a whole bunch of easy, basic questions for elementary kids. The very first of the 30 items, the very first item was write your name in the top right-hand corner of this paper and turn it over and put your pencil down.
Yeah.
But all the kids, everyone in class, continued to answer all 30 questions when ignoring the very first instruction.
Yeah.
Thinking whoever gets done quickest is going to be rewarded somehow and going to be the best. Or whoever gets the right answers to all 30 questions is going to be the best. But all of them did not realize that they weren't supposed to answer the last 29 questions. So, because they ignored the very first basic instruction. Put your name on the paper, turn it over, and put your pencil down.
Yeah.
So this is the same type of test with Saul that at least in my experience, that's the way I see it. It's the same type of thing. The Father told him very clearly what to do, but then he just did not carry it out. And real quick though, you did mention the hem of his garment. And so that actually leads us into our theological rabbit trail.
I always love that section.
So guys, this is going to be our little bit of a sidebar, a little bit of a deeper look into this little moment here where Samuel he just chastises Saul. He tries to walk away. Saul reaches out, grabs the hem of his robe, and it tears. So Samuel says to him, "The Lord has torn the kingdom of Israel from you today and has given it to your neighbor who's better than you." Either Saul is just trying to drop bars because he's trying to make the event applicable to his further chastisement. But this statement could have been made before his garment was torn, his robe was torn.
Yep.
But instead, he makes it after his robe is torn. So let's dig a little bit into this idea of what's he talking about? Why did Samuel say this to Saul after his robe was torn and not before? Because before he said, look, you've sinned and transgressed.
Yep.
And he just tries to walk away, right? He tries to tell him, you've not done what's righteous in the sight of the Lord after you're made king and you're expected to do what's righteous. But then he adds on to this after this moment of him being torn and saying, hey, the kingdom is going to be torn from you too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's dig into the fulfillment of this little prophecy from Samuel. And it's actually in 1 Samuel 24, 1-4. So it says, after Saul had returned from pursuing the Philistines, he was told, David is in the wilderness of En-Gedi. So Saul took 3,000 chosen men from all Israel and went to look for David and his men in the region of the rocks of the wild goats. Soon Saul came to the sheepfolds along the road where there was a cave, and he went in to relieve himself. And David and his men were hiding in the recesses of the cave. So David's men said to him, this is the day about which the Lord said to you, behold, I will deliver your enemy into your hand so that you may do with him as you wish. Then David crept up secretly and cut off a corner of Saul's robe. Afterwards, David's conscience was stricken because he had cut off the corner of Saul's robe. So he said to his men, the Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed. May I never lift my hand against him, since he is the Lord's anointed. With these words, David restrained his men, and he did not let them rise up against Saul. Then Saul left the cave and went on his way. And after that, David got up and went out of the cave and called out to Saul, my lord, the king. When Saul looked behind him, David bowed face down in reverence and said to Saul, why do you listen to the words of men who say, look, David intends to harm you? Behold, this day you have seen with your own eyes that the Lord delivered you into my hand in the cave. I was told to kill you, but I spared you and said, I will not lift up my hand against my Lord, since he is the Lord's anointed. See, my father, look at the corner of your robe in my hand, for I have cut it off, but I did not kill you. See and know that there is no evil or rebellion in my hands. I have not sinned against you, even though you are hunting me down to take my life. May the Lord judge between you and me, and may the Lord take vengeance on you, but my hand will never be against you. As the old proverb says, wickedness proceeds from the wicked, but my hand will never be against you. Against whom has the king of Israel come out? Whom are you pursuing? A dead dog? A flea? May the Lord be our judge and decide between you and me. May he take notice and plead my case and deliver me from your hand. When David had finished saying these things, Saul called back, is that your voice, David, my son? Then Saul wept aloud and said to David, you are more righteous than I, for you have rewarded me with good, though I have rewarded you with evil. And you have shown this day how well you have dealt with me. For when the Lord delivered me into your hand, you did not kill me. When a man finds his enemy, does he let him go away unharmed? May the Lord reward you with good for what you've done for me this day. Now I know for sure that you will be king, and that the kingdom of Israel will be established in your hands. So now swear to me by the Lord that you will not cut off my descendants or wipe out my name from my father's house. So David gave his oath to Saul. Then Saul returned home, but David and his men went up to the stronghold. Okay.
Yeah.
How beautifully interesting that Samuel, after having the hem of his garment, the corner of the hem of his garment torn off, then turns to Saul and says, the kingdom will be torn from you. The moment that Saul realizes the kingdom truly is forever torn from him is the moment that he's shown mercy by David cutting off a corner of his garment. And even verbally acknowledges, and he says, now I know that you will be established as king of Israel because you're more righteous than I.
Yeah.
So it's this incredibly ironic parallel of Saul being disobedient and disqualifying for himself because of his non-Torah behavior. He disqualifies himself for the position God wanted for him. Whereas David further qualifies himself for the position God wants for him by showing the disobedient respect and love, which is Torah, by doing Torah to the disobedient. So what are your thoughts, brother?
Well, we see David being put in a similar situation as Saul was in chapter 15 and verse 4 here of chapter 24, where his men in the cave is whispering to him, saying, behold, I will deliver. Well, this is the day that Yah said to you, behold, I will deliver enemy into your hands, that you may do with him as you wish. So he's having that peer pressure from the guys around him. And if you guys remember from First Samuel chapter 22, verse 2, the 400 men that he's going around with, they're not the most upstanding characters. They're like the rejects. They would have no qualms about killing Saul while he's relieving himself. So he's standing up for what's right in that situation and saying, far be it from me that I should touch Yah's anointed. And that, once again, in that same scenario where Saul actually broke under pressure, David is just standing up for what's right.
That's right.
So I think, like you said, that further solidifies and helps Saul understand in that moment that, yes, this is truly who will establish the kingdom of Israel.
Amen. This is what a true leader has to do. Yes, David made other mistakes in his life, but in this moment, he is being 100% the best leader he can be, even in the face of his men, and not succumbing to the peer pressure like Saul did. So it's just quite an amazing example. Example here from the Father that he knew that Saul could have done this too. Saul had the ability to do this good leadership and this righteous Torah behavior, but he failed. So as a result, the Father was going to replace him. So on one hand, you're sitting there going, well, the Father knew he was going to fail, possibly, but he gave him the opportunity to surprise him.
Yeah.
He knew that he wanted to give Saul an opportunity to show him kindness. For whatever reason, Saul was chosen among his brothers from Benjamin. And Samuel was extremely excited about that, which I think I don't know why. It doesn't tell us why Samuel was so heart-stricken about Saul's rebellion, but he is. To the point where he didn't even go see him anymore for the rest of his life, and he mourns him. And we're going to see in the next chapter how Saul is still mourning him, and the Father has to tell Saul, "Hey, get up, stop mourning. Go and do this other thing I got for you to do." So it's so fascinating to see that the Father gave Saul the opportunity to be a righteous ruling king and do Torah as you should as a king. But he was afraid of the people. Dude, you're an authority over the people. What are you talking about? And supposedly he was a good warrior, and he was like a whole head and shoulders taller than everybody in Israel. He was extremely tall, So what are you talking about, bro?
I think he worried more about being a people pleaser than pleasing Yah.
Exactly. And that's
very unfortunate.
Yes, and it's super destructive, right? Because the people will change their mind every day. You have to be following a consistent pattern of standard of behavior. The Torah gives you the straight and narrow, right? This is the easiest way to walk in the same consistent pattern of behavior. And so the people around you can know what to expect. But if you allow the mob or just the peer pressure of your friends or even sometimes your family to try to influence you away from the Father's instructions, they will do it every time. So this is why a leader has to be steadfast in knowing the commands of the Lord and following them, carrying them out. And in fact, isn't it Deuteronomy 17 that the kings of Israel were supposed to have the Torah read in their presence? They're supposed to write and physically write the Torah in the presence of the priests, so they should know it. I wonder if Samuel or if Saul ever did this. I don't know.
Yeah, that's a good question. I asked myself that question even with David and Solomon. And like you said, fearing Yah is so important. That's one of the aspects of the spirit of Yah that we see in Isaiah chapter 11 that mentions the spirit that will rest upon our Messiah. And the last one is the spirit of the fear of the Lord, right? And that is so crucial and important, that you are no respecter of man, but that you do only what is just and right. And that's one of my prayers, that as we're going out into the world, because we can't be locked into our rooms or our houses our whole lives, we have to interact with the people that don't know Torah, that don't want to follow it, that our fear of Yah would supersede anything that man can put on us.
Amen. I agree, brother. That's noble to think and pray for sure. So guys, thank you for allowing us to divert a little bit and to entertain this theological rabbit trail. All right, real quick, let's finish our wrap up of chapter 15 of what we read here in 1 Samuel 15. Samuel is sent by Yahweh to tell Saul to defeat the Amalekites and devote everything they have to destruction. And guys, go check out Exodus. This goes all the way back to Exodus 17, when the Amalekites tried to attack Israel coming out of Egypt in the Exodus. So this is constant animosity between the two peoples that persisted all the way up into the days of Samuel. Before attacking the Amalekites, Saul warned the Kenites to escape or be consumed in the battle with the Amalekites. Now, the Kenites, they were the descendants of Jethro that lived in the area. So this is kind of interesting. You got this tie-in also to Exodus 18, where Jethro shows up.
Yep.
Right after the Amalekites in chapter 17 tried to fight the Israelites. So, and here that apparently they live in the same region, even seemingly amidst each other. So it's interesting that we see the same two concepts talked about back to back in Exodus. It's almost as if like Jethro was somehow tipped off that the Amalekites went to go fight Israel in the desert, and so then he travels down to see how things went and arrives in Exodus 18 to see that they were victorious, and then everything takes place in Exodus 18 as we read it. So it's just, I love little points like this, Hannibal, because you get that like background context to other people groups that are living and breathing and doing their thing, because the scriptures solely focus on certain people, right?
Yeah.
So you get all that like background context of the rest of the story, and that's the kind of information I'm gonna love hearing about when I get to the Father's house.
All the background stories.
Just gonna kindly request that the Father allow me to talk with the historian angels, that have. They can take me to the record rooms and we can, have a visual holographic display of all these events happening behind the scenes that led into what we read in scripture. Saul defeated the Amalekite forces that day, but he doesn't destroy everything they own. He spares the choice sheep and cattle to sacrifice them to Yahweh. We, of course, learn that this is not what was instructed. Samuel arrives to confront Saul for his disobedience and tells him the kingship will be taken from him by decree of Yahweh, which is a huge deal. Samuel executes Agag, the king of the Amalekites, in the presence of the Lord. And I actually wanted to go back to this real quick and talk to you about it. I got it highlighted.
Yep.
A lot of translations will have this word cheerfully or some variation of this word, but I looked it up, and it's actually it's interesting that there's other translations that refer to it as it's not cheerfully as in we would think cheerfully, right? It's basically just saying he showed up not expecting to be killed.
Yeah.
So, because think about the what's transpired here. Samuel shows up to Saul near the battlefield, I guess. Samuel leaves one location, goes to another location to see Saul, to reprimand him for his disobedience, to tell him the kingdom is going to be taken away from him. And then it seems like Samuel then says, "Bring me Agag, king of the Amalekites."
Yeah.
And then Samuel takes the sword and kills Agag. And it says, here's that interesting, curious phrase again here in verse 33. It says, Samuel hacked Agag to pieces before the Lord at Gilgal. Yep. What does this mean?
Well, I assume that an angel was there, being present in that moment. Just like we read in chapter 27 with Isaac giving the blessing to Jacob.
Yeah. There are people maybe watching in the audience that would say, okay, now wait a minute, Sean. This says before the Lord in a lot of different places. Oh, you're right. It surely does.
Yep.
So people might say, but wait, I mean, this is just a phrase. This is just a phrase that's being thrown around. Like you talk about this all the time, Sean, that they have these phrases, these common Hebraic way of writing and speech and idioms. And this is just because, maybe this is because Samuel is the prophet of the Lord. Therefore, he's doing this before the Lord because he was told by the Lord to do this. Oh, by the way, did you notice that Agag still wasn't dead?
Yeah.
That's something else that Samuel probably noticed was wrong about this situation.
Yeah, and that's probably why he thought that he was not going to get killed, because when everyone else got killed, he was spared. So he's like, maybe my punishment is different.
Yeah, exactly. So just for those listening to the audience, like not only did Saul admit he transgressed, but he actually let their king still live. So something's not right here. So Samuel takes matters into his own hands, and it's before the Lord. And guys, everything is before the Lord. If we're trying to be metaphoric about this and say, that, it's just a figure of speech. Well, the Lord sees everything that happens on the earth. But he does it, and that information is reported back to him through his ministry and service to the angels. This is how he says he witnessed the Amalekites attack the Israelites coming out of Egypt in the wilderness. because the angel of the presence was there and witnessed this event take place.
Mm-hmm.
The same angel of the presence who validates the prophets, who validates the dedication of the temple, who validates the high priest being nominated and ordained, who validates the anointing of the kings. He's there with Samuel watching this take place. He's validating as the witness, in my opinion, who saw this transgress from the Amalekites in Exodus 17. He's watching this be taken care of, and this being tied up, this undone business being taken care of later down the road. He's still there. Yeah. And this is why Samuel just doesn't say, like, make sure you kill that king too. Why is he still alive? No, he says, bring him to me, and he kills him immediately. This is kind of a big deal, guys.
We see more confirmation that there's actually an angel in verse 29. If you were to jump back.
That's right.
Moreover, the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind, for he's not a man that he should change his mind. So, I mean, that rings like it's an angel that's there representing.
That's right. Yeah. This is, I think I tried to mention this a couple weeks ago when Marlo was our guest to read with us, that this is a common phrase for the angel of Yahweh, the angel of the presence, where they talk about the glory of Israel, that he's there speaking and talking and doing things, because this is why, this is how the Father communicates messages to men on the earth. He uses his servants, the angels. So that way, guys, I guess the reason why I stress this so much as we go through these passages, because it seems so sterilized. It seems so vague sometimes when we read Genesis. If you don't have this understanding of how the Father works through his angels, you can just glaze right over this and miss this. And then you think that it's natural for these prophets to just hear thoughts in their head. And that's not how the Father validated these prophets. Like, they just didn't, I have a good idea and I have the authority of God to make it happen. Like, that's not how God validated his prophets or gave communicated messages through his prophets to the people. Like, there was a hierarchy, a flow of information so they could know. And the people there also could see the angels of the Lord speaking to the prophets. Just like in Exodus 33, all the people got up at the edge of their tent and bowed down when they saw the angel of the presence descend into the tent of meeting to speak with Moses. Every single time this happened, this validates Moses as the authority figure over the people. Yep. So when the reason why I kind of get excited, Hannibal, about this is because in the modern day, you see so many people saying that they're a prophet of the Lord.
Yeah.
And you need to listen to me because I'm a prophet of the Lord. And you're like, whew, that's a big claim, brother. You want to take a minute. You want to think about what you're saying, because that's a big claim. Because, and of course, they want people to listen to them and follow them, and they accept their rebuke and their chastisement because they're a prophet of the Lord. And I'm like, these guys, you're flowing in a totally different behavior than these old school prophets of the Lord. Yeah, so I would be very careful about making that claim. Okay, for people out there listening. Yeah, it's a scary thing to claim to be if you're not truly can't back it up, as these guys could back it up with a physical show of power. It kind of reminds me of like what Paul says, where he talks about those who have a form of godliness but denying the power thereof. Just they're acting righteous, they're acting like this, but the Father's not truly validating them and what they're doing, like he does with these angels everywhere. So exactly. Yeah, there's a lot. There's so many. When you start like putting on your glasses to see how the Father uses his angels everywhere, you start to realize, oh my goodness, these angels were like everywhere in the Old Testament.
Everywhere, yeah,
everywhere. It's kind of awesome.
Really.
And lastly, Samuel stops visiting Saul for his rejection of the Lord, and this is interesting because apparently Samuel wanted Saul to visit him. Because we see in 1 Samuel 28, like he even goes to the witch of Endor to try, after Saul's dead, to try to get advice from Saul. You know what I mean? But because he was rejected and being wicked, Samuel refused to speak with Saul. And how interesting that, like, this is Samuel's attitude towards Saul. But even after he dies, Saul still doesn't want to like leave him alone, right? He's just like, dude, I didn't want to talk to you for decades when I was alive. Why would you think after I'm dead I want to talk to you? It's hilarious. Yahweh regrets making Saul king over Israel. And I just want to point out to folks in this passage here, the Hebrew word for that, I have it at the very bottom of the screen in tiny writing. that this is the word nakam in Hebrew, and it's to be sorry, to be grieved, to rue, or to be upset, to console oneself, or to be repentant. So this is basically this idea of, it's kind of like in Genesis chapter 6, verse 5. Yeah, where Yahweh says he repented that he made man on the earth, right? It doesn't mean that he just wants to undo the creation of mankind. It doesn't mean that he made a mistake in making Saul king over Israel. It just got to the point where people have free individual will. So Saul transgresses what was given to him, and he made the father upset. Made him sad, you know?
Yeah.
So, all right, brother. Do you want to play 16?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, just 1 second here. Yeah, so we'll jump into 16, and then we got, I think, just one chapter left, John chapter 1 after that, and we'll be good.
All right. 1 Samuel chapter 16. Now Yahweh said to Samuel, "How long are you going to mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and go. I am sending you to Jesse of Bethlehem, for I have selected from his sons a king for myself." "How can I go?" Samuel asked. "Saul will hear of it and kill me." Yahweh answered, "Take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Then invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what you are to do. You are to anoint for me the one I indicate." So Samuel did what Yahweh had said and went to Bethlehem. When the elders of the town met him, they trembled and asked, "Do you come in peace?" "In peace," he replied. "I have come to sacrifice to Yahweh. Consecrate yourself and come with me to the sacrifice." Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and said, "Surely here before Yahweh is his anointed." But Yahweh said to Samuel, "Do not consider his appearance or height, for I have rejected him. Yahweh does not see as man does, for man sees the outward appearance, but Yahweh sees the heart." Then Jesse called Abinadab and presented him to Samuel, who said, "Yahweh has not chosen this one either." Next Jesse presented Shammah, but Samuel said, "Yahweh has not chosen this one either." Thus Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel told him, "Yahweh has not chosen any of these." And Samuel asked him, "Are these all the sons you have?" "They're still the youngest," Jesse replied, "but he's tending to the sheep." "Send for him," Samuel replied, "for we will not sit down to eat until he arrives." So Jesse sent for his youngest son and brought him in. He was ruddy, with beautiful eyes and a handsome appearance. And Yahweh said, "Rise and anoint him, for he is the one." So Samuel took the horn of oil and anointed him in the presence of his brothers. And the Spirit of Yahweh rushed upon David from that day forward. Then Samuel set out and went to Ramah. After the Spirit of Yahweh had departed from Saul, a spirit of distress from Yahweh began to torment him. Saul's servant said to him, "Surely a spirit of distress from God is tormenting you. Let our Lord command your servants here to seek out someone who can skillfully play the harp. Whenever the spirit of distress from God is upon you, he is to play it, and you will be well." And Saul commanded his servants, "Find me someone who plays well, and bring him to me." One of the servants answered, "I have seen a son of Jesse of Bethlehem who knows how to play the harp. He is a mighty man of valor, a warrior, eloquent and handsome, and Yahweh is with him." So Saul sent a message to Jesse and said, "Send me your son David, who is with the sheep." And Jesse took a donkey loaded with bread, a skin of wine, and 1 young goat, and sent them to Saul with his son David. When David came to Saul and entered his service, Saul admired him greatly, and David became his armor-bearer. Then Saul sent word to Jesse, saying, "Let David remain in my service, for I am pleased with him." And whenever the Spirit of God came upon Saul, David would pick up his harp and play, and Saul would become well, and the spirit of distress would depart from him.
Awesome. Thank you, brother. Thank you.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting chapter because we get this wonderful moment of David being anointed by Samuel, and then it's consequently, like, without even realizing it, Saul invites his replacement into his household to comfort him. You know, it's kind of such irony. But yeah, just as a quick summary for those who are studying along at the house, Yahweh instructed Samuel to go to Bethlehem and anoint one of Jesse's sons as the next king of Israel. Samuel consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to a sacrifice meal for the atonement moment. The anointed moment. What's your understanding of consecrating Jesse and his sons, Hannibal? How would you see
it? That would be a form of mikvah or immersion or washing, like a ritual cleansing, as we see in the Torah.
Amen.
Yeah. And Genesis 35 is a good example when Jacob told his servants to put away their foreign idols and to wash themselves before they went up to Bethel.
Amen. That's right, brother. So it looks like baptism wasn't invented in the New Testament.
No, not at all. Because, we see in John when the Levites and the priests and the Pharisees come to John, they already know what he's doing. It's not like this new concept, like, what are you doing here with the water? They're asking him why he's doing it.
That's right. Yep,
Yeah.
that's right. And I think we're actually going to touch on that a little bit in our companion passage as well.
Yeah.
Yahweh told Samuel not to be swayed by height or appearance because he sees the heart of a man. Awesome. That's amazing. Samuel reviewed 7 of Jesse's 8 sons, but doesn't choose any of them. He asked Jesse if he had another son, and Jesse called for David to appear before Samuel. So once David arrived, the Lord told Samuel to anoint him as the next king of Israel. Later, Saul is feeling distressed and wants a musician to play for him. The king's servant suggests David, son of Jesse. David impresses Saul and serves him as his armor bearer and musician. It's kind of an upgrade, right, than just coming in to play the harp, right?
Yep.
Now you're attending to his weaponry. But Saul doesn't know David is going to replace him. So this is kind of that, it's kind of like that irony. It reminds me of Rebecca and Isaac, where she knows what she needs to do this whole time, way before Abraham dies, and doesn't really tell, and she does all this for Jacob's sake, knowing this information all this time, and doesn't really tell Isaac because she's trying to let him save face. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
So it's interesting that David, he's already been anointed king, future king of Israel, and by the most prominent prophet in the land. And he doesn't, as he's spending all this time with Saul in his personal chambers, trying to make him feel better, he doesn't, can you imagine? That would be hilarious, actually, if he just kind of like slipped in one of his songs while playing the harp. Like, oh, King David, I'm going to replace you in the future. He's just like, and then David's like half asleep, and he raises up. He's like, wait, what'd you say? You sing that again? He's like, oh, King David, may you live forever. He's like, wait, what are you singing? No, I mean, Saul, may you be established forever. No, he didn't do that, guys. He didn't do that. He was respectful, just like we saw in 1 Samuel 24, that when he had a chance to kill the Lord's anointed, he did not. So just in this moment, as David, much younger, as a boy, is also respecting the Lord's anointed, even though he knows the behind the scenes politics that's going to happen to be a change of power, and he's going to receive the power. He's humble about it, and he doesn't gloat it. He doesn't, make mention of it. So it's powerful, man. It's very powerful.
It's very interesting about the whole concept of spirits departing from Saul, from music being played. And that, it's sort of off topic, but it reminds me of, I think it's the biggest intact scrolls of the Psalms found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. I think it's 11Q5, where it says that there's a prose there about David, that he wrote 4 specific songs to ward away evil spirits. And I wonder if that's one of those, or, it's an interesting thought, but I have no idea.
Doesn't the Dead Sea Scrolls also say that David wrote?
It's the same prose,
a song
he wrote over
for every Sabbath.
Exactly. Every feast, every Sabbath, every season of the year. That's every 13 weeks, and for every different occasion. So
that's cool.
Yeah.
I don't do it a lot these days, but I play the guitar, write music. And when I was younger and I was first learning, I had made this, like, I tell people this is a part of my story, that I play the guitar, and tell them that I made a pact with the Father when I first got my guitar, because I was young and broke and didn't, around college age, didn't have time for, I didn't have time or money to go pay for actual guitar lessons. So I just bought a book on guitar strings, and I bought a little cheap $100 guitar, and I was trying to teach myself how to play songs. And I remember thinking, like, this is really intimidating, trying to learn all these different chords. There's 22 frets, 24 if you got a cutaway. And I was thinking, how can I figure this out? On my own, I need a teacher. And I thought, all right, I can't afford a teacher. So Father, here, how about this? I'll make a deal with you. Like, this is me in my young mind, right? I'll make a deal with you. If you help me play this, learn how to play this, then I will only play music that's to you, about you, or for you. And so over the next 2 or 3 years, I literally got hundreds of songs. And I got to the point where I would play at local coffee shops. I'd play at youth groups at churches. And, and people said they liked my music, so it was just such an interesting thing. And of course I never played the music of the time, right? I never played Pearl Jam. I never played Creed. I never played, Megadeth or any of the other, bands that,
Yeah.
people that start playing the guitar, they get excited about accomplished guitarists. I just tried to play worship music to him, and he kept giving me song after song after song. So I wonder if, if that's the same gift he gave David, who clearly was an amazing musician with hundreds of songs, so it's just a beautiful thing.
Yeah. Beautiful gift.
Yeah. And I wanted to write an album that was all kingdom music. So I didn't even understand what I do today about the kingdom to come and the New Jerusalem and all that stuff. But I did understand enough to know that the New Jerusalem was promised to us, as our inheritance. I just didn't understand exactly what that meant. And so I remember talking to my roommate at the time saying, I just want to write an entire album of like 10 songs of just praise music as if we're already in the kingdom and we're praising him from that perspective. Like all this drama's done and we're at peace and we're all resurrected and we're just in the New Jerusalem and we're praising him. Like, what would that music sound like? And so I didn't make the album. I didn't know what to write, you know what I'm saying? Because I'm still in this life going through this, So, but like, that's my heart. Maybe I'll get to do that in the kingdom,
Yeah, willing. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So this leads us into our next segment, and it's called Come Let Us Reason Together. All right. Annabelle.
Yeah.
Was Samuel alone when he anointed David as a boy?
No. He said something along the lines that we will not sit down to eat before the boy comes. Yeah, right there.
So who's the we?
The angel, the same angel that gave Samuel the command to go and anoint David, I believe.
This is crazy, right? Are we seeing this dude everywhere?
I wonder if it's just this one guy, because he has a lot of stories that I want to ask him about when we get to the kingdom.
It's the same. It might be the same dude that was sent to go with them in Exodus 23. The same guy
possibly.
that was. If it's the same guy of Exodus 23, then according to Jubilees, it's the same guy that was with Moses and Noah and Abraham.
Yeah,
and all these guys, even all the way back to Enoch and Adam. So if this is the same dude that was like the guy sent to assist Israel. It's very interesting.
Very.
And of course, this is kind of a big deal as far as choosing the new king and anointing him through the prophet in the quote unquote presence of the Lord, right? So it's interesting that he just says we will not sit down until he arrives.
Yeah.
So
it completely gives you a different understanding also of the previous verses when the other boys are being presented to Samuel. And then you see that Yahweh has not chosen this one either. And I believe previously that Samuel had this voice in his head, but maybe the angel's right there next to him and saying, nope, not this one. Next guy, move on. Who knows?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely, man. That is what's so interesting and powerful about this is that, again, it draws us to a stronger understanding of these prophets weren't just making this stuff up in their head, guys. They, like, the Father validated these concepts with how he does it, with literally his ministering servants. So it's hard for us to kind of put ourselves in this place because we're in this dispersion now where there's no temple, there's no prophet, there's no priest, there's no sacrifices happening, there's no angel of the presence validating all that. So we're just in a totally different zone right now, right? Where we allow that we're still being ministered to by angels unaware, as I believe Hebrews 13:2, that the writer of Hebrews tries to let us know that many times we could be entertaining angels unaware. But in this specific case, when it came to these huge decisions, it wasn't just like they had to just do guesswork. Like the Father is like, I'm going to make this decision easy for you. And in the sight of all the other people, I'm going to validate this for you. So I think about it in the minds of the best I can from modern day. Okay, let me say this the right way. In our history, that's given to us as what we call secular history. The accounts from the ancient world talk about what the Bible calls the Nephilim, right? The rulers of the other nations who were bigger, stronger, and sometimes do magical abilities, it seems like. And the Bible explains to us that those things were accomplished with the work of unclean spirits and Satan himself. deceiving lying signs and wonders. But the average, say, Hittite or person in Greece, as they hear about the quote unquote gods, they just go to these temples and see these wood, gold, and silver statues that were fashioned to look like those gods.
Yep.
But they never really like interacted with them.
Mm.
Like they didn't actually, this is where I love the story of Bel and the Dragon, where Daniel has to reveal to Nebuchadnezzar, hey man, this statue is not real. Like this food that you're putting in front of it every night, the priests are just coming out and eating it, like to make you think the statue's eating it, but the statue is not real. Like, and so it reminds me of, what is it, Deuteronomy chapter 30 or I think it's chapter 30. No, it's chapter 10, where Moses is saying, what nation has God so close to them as we do?
Yeah.
Like, they literally had a presence, a ministering angel of the Father to interact with and see on a regular basis. Whereas the other nations had to form an image, an idol, and worship that which doesn't speak or talk or think. And it's just like
that we see. That's something that we see throughout the scriptures, where Yah says, your gods, you've made them with your own hands. They don't speak. And I can't really wrap my head around the idea of there always being an angel present in Israel and them still doing this wickedness. But at the same time, in my own mind, I am 100% convinced. I know that Yah exists, right? But I still mess up. Like I don't fear him at times. So I'm not better than any one of the guys that we read about right now.
Yeah, absolutely. But these particular prophets, though, had this surety. They had this confidence to go with the authority that they had to go do and say things, because there was literally an angel showing up to tell them the message they were supposed to go relay to the rebellious kings of Israel. And otherwise, if you're just taking it upon yourself, because you just everyone and not everyone, but a lot of people in the kingdom, whenever they saw the kings acting unrighteously, knew that they were outside of Torah and transgressing the covenant. But they didn't have the unction or the power, the confidence to go and address that king, knowing that king could kill them, unless they had some absolute affirmation, right? And this is what I love about this, as we see layered throughout these stories, the Father working through Israel with his angels, which is how he designed this to happen, constantly, even to the point, as like we read earlier in 1 Samuel 15:23, when Samuel is with this angel as well on this duty to rebuke the king and also to take vengeance on an evil king. We see that, like you already mentioned earlier, it's the same thing here in verse 29 of Samuel 15, that this angel of the presence who is there and Samuel is basically relaying his words and reminding Saul that, hey, the glory of Israel does not lie or change his mind. He's not a man. He's an angel. He's a spiritual being. He's not a man. So like this, and this is, of course, is the same type of fervency, the same type of warning, if you will, that we see in Exodus 23, when Yahweh tells Moses, hey, this guy, do not mess with him. He will not forgive your sins. He will not play nice with you. Like this guy, he does what I say. He's there to guide you, protect you, lead over you, but he's not a dude. He's not a regular man.
He will not pardon your sins.
He will not pardon your. You got to act right around this dude. And of course, this is the behavior that the prophets exemplified, right? They knew how to act right and do Torah, and therefore they got this privilege of interacting with these angels and had the confidence to go and rebuke the wicked kings in spite of facing fear of death. So we also see in this same passage, as I just want to show people just a little bit of a parallel here, that some of what we were seeing as the glory of the Israel as a reference to this angel that's with them. It's also called the strength of Israel in the KJV. The Septuagint actually kind of says something very wholly interesting.
Yeah, I did some digging around that part, and to my understanding, most of the scrolls that we found from 1 Samuel among the Dead Sea Scrolls match the Septuagint more than they match the Masoretic. And it seems like, Samuel being a prophet, him being in the temple with the high priest, since he was given there from his birth by his mother after he was weaned. I'm sure he read the writings of their fathers, from like Enoch and Abraham and everyone. And I believe that it's in the Testament of who is it? Testament of Zebulon, chapter 9, where he said that he read from his fathers that Israel would be split into two.
Yeah.
So it seems like that is something that has been prophesied way early, probably in parts of Enoch that we don't have access to today.
That's right.
So he knew.
Yeah, that's right. So this is an interesting point where at this moment with the first king of Israel, Samuel comes up and says, Israel will divide it into two.
Yeah.
Where the statement right before in verse 28, he says the kingdom will be torn from you. Well, we see that it is, but there is this transitionary moment before David fully takes over and Saul's remnants and the forces loyal to Saul are still in there and, trying to resist the transition of power, that the nation is divided into two. And unfortunately, right after Solomon, it's united under Solomon, but right after Solomon, Rehoboam and Jeroboam, it's divided into two again.
Yeah.
It's really sad. But in this Septuagint verse right here, it says, God will not turn or repent, for he's not a man as to repent. Guys, if we understand the use of the Hebrew word Elohim, it's the translator's decision to capitalize that G.
Yep.
But if we understand the use of the word Elohim, it can refer to angels. So this could be very, if we had this perception the whole time, understanding how much the Father uses his angels everywhere in reference to the priests and the prophets of Israel, and we only had the Septuagint to read from, we would know instantly in the context of this passage that Samuel is speaking to Saul with the angel of the Lord there to validate what's happening.
Yeah.
And that this was a big deal for him to show up. Could be why Saul put on such airs and tried to act like nothing was wrong.
Yeah.
He's like, all right, whenever this guy shows up, it's not always the best outcome. So let me be very gracious to these people and try to win them over with a good meal. So yeah. And also I love that the Aramaic Bible in plain English, it calls this the glorious one of Israel, because if he's an angel, then he would be noticeably different.
Yeah.
Usually. So guys, I appreciate you joining us for that segment of Come Let Us Reason Together. And I think we're going to jump into our last chapter here, John chapter 1.
Yep.
So who read last? Was it you?
I think it was me, yeah.
Okay, I'll pick this one up real quick. John chapter 1, 1 through 8. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness has not overcome it. There came a man who was sent from God. His name was John. He came as a witness to testify about the light, so that through him everyone might believe. He himself was not the light, but he came to testify about the light. The true light who gives light to every man was coming into the world. He was in the world, and though the world was made through him, the world did not recognize him. He came to his own, and his own did not receive him. But to all who did receive him, to those who believed in his name, he gave the right to become children of God, children born not of blood, nor of the desire of the will of man, but born of God. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, and the glory of the one and only Son from the Father, full of grace and truth. John testified concerning him. He cried out, saying, This is he of whom I said, He who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me. From his fullness we have all received grace upon grace. For the law was given through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. No one has ever seen God, but the one and only Son, who is himself God, and he is at the Father's side. He has made him known. And this was John's testimony when the Jews of Jerusalem sent priests and Levites to ask him, Who are you? He did not refuse to confess, but he openly declared, I am not the Christ. Then who are you? They inquired. Are you Elijah? He said, I am not. Are you the prophet? And he answered, No. So they said to him, Who are you? We need an answer for those who sent us. What do you say about yourself? John replied in the words of Isaiah the prophet, I am a voice of one calling in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord. Then the Pharisees who had been sent asked him, Why then do you baptize, if you are not the Christ, nor Elijah, nor the prophet? I baptize with water, John replied, but among you stands one you do not know. He is the one who comes after me, the straps of whose sandals I am not worthy to untie. All this happened at Bethany, beyond the Jordan, where John was baptizing. The next day, John saw Jesus coming toward him and said, Look, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world. This is he of whom I said, A man who comes after me has surpassed me, because he was before me. I myself did not know him, but the reason I came baptizing with water was that he might be revealed to Israel. Then John testified, I saw the Spirit descending from heaven like a dove and resting on him. I myself did not know him, but the one who sent me to baptize with water told me, The man on whom you see the Spirit descend and rest is he who will baptize with the Holy Spirit. I have seen and testified that this is the Son of God." The next day, Jesus was there again with 2 of his disciples. And when he saw Jesus walking by, he said, "Look, the Lamb of God." And when the 2 disciples heard him say this, they followed Jesus. They turned and saw him and saw them. Jesus turned and saw them following. "What do you want?" he asked. They said to him, "Rabbi," which means teacher, "where are you staying?" "Come and see," he replied. So they went and saw where he was staying and spent the day with him. It was about the 10th hour. Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, was one of the 2 who heard John's testimony and followed Jesus. He first found his brother Simon and told him, "We have found the Messiah," which is translated as Christ. Andrew brought him to Jesus, who looked at him and said, "You are Simon, son of John. You will be called Cephas," which is translated as Peter. The next day, Jesus decided to set out for Galilee. Finding Philip, he told him, "Follow me." Now, Philip was from Bethsaida, the same town as Andrew and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and told him, "We have found the one who Moses wrote about in the law, the one prophets foretold, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. Can anything good come from him?" "Nazareth?" Nathanael asked. "Come and see," said Philip. When Jesus saw Nathanael approaching, he said of him, "Here is a true Israelite, in whom there is no deceit." "How do you know me?" Nathanael asked Jesus. And Jesus replied, "Before Philip called you, I saw you under the fig tree." "Rabbi," Nathanael answered, "you are the Son of God. You are the King of Israel." Jesus said to him, "Do you believe just because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? You will see greater things than these." Then he declared, "Truly, truly, I tell you, you will all see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." Well, Hannibal, this particular chapter we could probably spend 5 hours on.
Yes, really, we could.
But we're going to have to try to tackle it in a short summary today. What's the first thing that you'd like to address in this chapter?
Well, that I would like to address is like your first point there, that John 1:1-3, we have the whole explanation of the Son being with the Father from the beginning, both being of Elohim nature, and we see later on in the very same chapter that everyone that believes in his name can become sons of God, not through the will of man's strength or by blood, but through the process of believing in his name. And we see something similar in 1 John 3:2, I believe, where it says, "We do not yet know what we will be, but we will be like him when we see him." So, of course, there is this eternal debate amongst us brethren of Christ about what exactly does it mean that the Son is God and he was with God and so on and so forth. But I believe that you've pretty eloquently explained that, like the prophet Enoch wrote, that the Son of Man was with the Father before the creation of the world, and he was abiding in his bosom. We see the same thing being mentioned in Isaiah 49, verse 1-2, that it was hidden with the Father as an arrow in his quiver. And now that he's been revealed, the light and the world, even though it was made through him, did not recognize him, even his own people. So I just find it very interesting that they were so confused in that generation.
Yes. Yeah. And this is, he says it like many, many times in this chapter that Jesus is the Son of God and that he was a God. He was God too. He was Elohim. So this is consistent with Psalm 45:6-7, where Yahweh prophesying about the Messiah calls the Messiah God also, because that term has a definition. The word Elohim or the word Theos in the Greek, it means a ruler, a spiritual being, someone that is in charge, right? And this is the point. Just like Nathanael says at the end of the chapter, he gets excited. He's like, "You are the King of Israel." That's someone that's a ruler, that's in charge.
Exactly.
So not only was he a Elohim, which is a spiritual being, just like the angels are referred to as Elohim, but they're also angels are points of authority, like we've been talking about in the previous passages, right? Yep. They're the authority validating everything the prophets and priests are doing. So Yeshua being sent in the flesh was with God in the beginning as a spiritual being. So to me, if we understand the meanings of these words, John 1:1 shouldn't be so debated as it is among so many denominations. Because it's just telling you that, look, the Father and the Son were there, just like Yeshua validates in John 17:5. He says he's with the Father before the world began, and it gives you inference, or basically, it blatantly tells you they were Elohim, they were gods in that nature. They were of the Elohim status. So obviously, the Father is the Almighty. He is the
Yes.
Most High, and the Most High sent his Son,
Mhm.
as John tries to emphatically tell the reader in John chapter 1.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Words mean things, and it becomes so much easier to understand the text when we don't try to force our own ideas into what the text is saying.
Yeah. It's just, we just keep it simple with what the words mean, and it's usually pretty easy to read. So yeah, that's a huge point. John explained that Yeshua is the light that was promised by the Almighty to be sent to Israel. I love this because this is a prophecy from Isaiah chapter 9, 1-2. John also explained that Yeshua was made into the flesh of mankind and walked among them. This is Paul reiterates this concept in 1 Timothy 3:16, that Yeshua is manifested in the flesh, and
Yes.
which means that he, in my understanding, means this is what he's tying it to verse 1 and 2 as well, that he was already existent before the world began. And that's why John then follows up with the statement saying that he will surpass me because he was before me.
Yeah.
And a lot of people have tried to explain that away, but I'm sitting there going, guys, that only applies if Yeshua is pre-existent before he was sent in the flesh, because John the Baptist was birthed first. Like he was born, he was older than Jesus, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Exactly. And we see the same thing in Paul writing in 2 Corinthians 8:9, that he who was rich became poor, so that through him we could become rich, right?
That's right.
And if he, I think there's some believers, beloved brothers and sisters, who believe that our Messiah only existed in the mind of the Father before he came in the flesh. But I think Paul and all of Scripture, in my opinion, but Paul, when he says stuff like he was rich and that he became poor for our sakes, means that he existed beforehand and had authority and power.
Yes, this is why I try to remind people that in John 18:38 and 39, Jesus directly tells Pilate, I am a king. My kingdom is not of this world. So like I guess a lot of people struggle with this, and that's where they try to make it, Trinitarian, because they'll think that, well, didn't Yahweh say he was the king of Israel? Yes. Yeah, Yahweh is the ultimate authority. He's the Most High. He's the Almighty.
Yes.
Even emperors have kings under them. And this is why Yeshua, the Son of God, is under the authority of the Almighty, his Father, but he still was the King of Heaven before he manifested in the flesh, just like now has become King of all kings, right? King of kings and Lord of lords, Master of masters and King of kings. That is what he's become now as a resurrected man. But he was the King of Heaven under the authority of the Father before he manifested in the flesh, which I believe why it was such a big deal for the angels to be, super excited about him doing this huge thing, right? Because it's like, I guess how should I say this? We see the king Samuel, we see in the book of Samuel, we see the king of Israel, Saul, be an unrighteous king whom, when asked to go and take care of the enemies of God, he can't do that because he fears the people. Whereas Yeshua, when asked to go to the earth to accomplish this role, to attain his priesthood and his position of king over heaven and earth, to take care of the enemies of God on the earth on the day of the Lord, he faithfully accomplishes that mission, regardless of what the people on earth think or even the rebellious angels of heaven think. He's not swayed by opinion. He just faithfully does what the Father asks. He is the ultimate king that Israel deserves and needs. And Saul unfortunately failed in that regard. And he's not tempted by sin, so therefore he's even greater than David, even though David faithfully executed judgment against the enemies of Israel. Or even like Samuel faithfully carried out judgment against Agag, one of the enemies of Israel. Still, these were feral men that suffered with their own temptations and weaknesses, and Yeshua did not sin. So he, in every regard, he earned his position as king and high priest over Israel. And this is why people that would understand that mission the Messiah was sent for, like Nathaniel, like Philip, like Andrew, that's why they get so excited when they say, we found him, the one that Moses wrote about. I just get excited about that.
Exactly. Yeah, it's an amazing thing, and so grateful that he overcame all the temptations and is now rightfully taking his position and is interceding on our behalf right now. It's so encouraging.
Yeah, it's truly beautiful. Truly is. So John tries to continue to explain that Yeshua existed before him. He explained that Yeshua was sent by the Father as his only son. And that's kind of, can't stress that enough. John tells the priests and the Levites he is not the Messiah. So it's interesting that the temple is interested, right, in what's going on. Why is John out here baptizing people? John explained that he was told to start baptizing and how he would recognize the Son of the Almighty. And that's actually something I wanted to kind of point out real quick, because I thought that was interesting. That see if I can find the exact verse.
It's 33.
Is it 33?
Yeah.
It says the man whom you, okay, it says, I myself did not know him, but the one who sent me to baptize with water told me. And then he repeats what he was told. Is this, like we've been talking about all day, guys? Who's talking to these prophets? Who's telling them these direct messages that are being cited and quoted? Is John just out in the wilderness eating locusts and dressed in burlap, just hearing voices from heaven? Is he just that guy that runs into town exclaiming, I heard this voice from heaven? You guys, the whole of Israel was going out to see John the Baptist. He was validated as a prophet of the Most High. Yeshua calls him the greatest of the prophets. So that means people that were lesser in him in respect and esteem were getting angelic visitations and direct messages for instruction. You don't think John was also getting that?
Absolutely. I believe that he did.
Like we talked about a couple of weeks ago in Luke chapter 1, Zacharias, the priest in the temple, angel shows up to him and gives him a message. Obviously, Mary and Joseph, angel shows up to them and gives them messages. Angels are everywhere in the scriptures, showing up to people and validating the information. Just like, why is John out there baptizing people in the wilderness? He answers their question, why are you out here baptizing? Well, I was told to. And the one who told me to also said I would recognize the Messiah when this happens. So here comes the big question, and this is just food for thought. He told him, the one who sent me to baptize with water told me, the man on whom you see the Spirit descend and rest is he who will baptize with the Holy Spirit. What do you think that looked like?
I have no idea. Actually, I can't. Of course, we've seen it animated or in movies, but I can't play it out in my head, actually.
Well, look at this passage that we're reading from. In almost every translation, this word Spirit in verse 33 that's highlighted here is capitalized. So John was told that he was going to see the man whom he sees the Spirit descend and rest is he who will baptize with the Holy Spirit.
Oh.
Is it just a bright little glowing cloud that descends in the shape of like a dove? Or is the description of it descending like a dove, meaning how he flies down, but this is an actual spiritual being? This is a angel of God validating the next prophet.
Yeah, I never thought of that, but yeah, it makes sense.
Because growing up, what do we see in cartoons and in books? You just see a glowing dove.
Yeah.
That they say, oh, no, it doesn't say a dove will land on him. It says descends as a dove. But it is an actual spirit that descends and rests on him.
Yeah, my mind is sort of blown right now.
Something to think about.
Yeah, definitely.
So, that's I think we already did that. But let me go back up to this real quick. So this is fascinating, guys. This is John the Baptist is not out there just making stuff up. He's not out there just going off of a whim or an intuition. Has the Father speaking to him like all the other prophets were spoken to, just like Jesus got to speak with angels. He was a prophet of the Lord, the greatest, right? Besides John, above John, but after I said this wrong way. After John, he's the greatest, right?
Yep.
So this is just, to me, it's like, why would the Father change his behavior and suddenly just start anointing new prophets with a glowy little cloud?
Yeah, that's true.
As opposed to maybe truly in the presence of everybody validating, oh, here's a Spirit of God that's descending on going to and fall on him, and John's going to see it. I wonder how many other people saw it, but definitely John saw it. And to me, I wouldn't put it past the fact that more people there on that day saw it as well.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's just because there's just, we talked a few weeks, I think maybe last week in John chapter 5 about the the angel that would get up and stir the waters so that the invalids would try to rush to the water to get healed. So there was this constant, in the ancient world, there was this constant mentality of interaction with the spiritual beings of heaven. And so this is why the attractiveness of Israel and everything that was supposed to go with Israel was supposed to be a metaphoric light to the nations and a literal light to nations.
Yeah.
And it was supposed to be something that was the goodness of God is what calls people to repentance. So an angel coming down to stir the waters so that people can get healed, or the prophet of God that everyone's been waiting for is validated in the presence of the people by an angel and affirmed by the most prominent prophet of the day. And he goes out and immediately starts healing people left and right, showing the goodness of God, preaching the kingdom and bringing people into repentance. It's a stark difference from the nations around them that are worshiping statues of idol and gold, engaging in horrific satanic rituals in order for that to be accomplished, much of which involves emotional, physical, and mental abuse.
Yeah.
So this is why the guy in Mark chapter 5 and Matthew chapter 8 that was had legion inside of him and was roaming amongst the tombs and was crying all the time and cutting himself and in deep despair and agony. And Yeshua comes by and frees that guy because he's the full representation and example of the goodness of God that represents everything that Israel supposed to stand for according to God. And I just get super excited that the Father, I think it's the enemy, and of course bad doctrine passed down to us through institutions throughout the last 1800 years that have taken away this perspective of Scripture.
Yeah.
That God was very present and active in people's lives who called out to him and who trusted in him in faith and walked in his ways. And that is the promise of Israel. That is the promise of the covenant. And Yeshua continues that promise through his priesthood.
Amen.
It's just beautiful.
Yeah.
So sorry to go off on a rant, but
it's fine.
It gets exciting. So lastly, we have John tells John recognizes and baptizes Yeshua, and then Yeshua chooses his first 4 disciples, all from Bethsaida in the region of Galilee. And so this is, I think, there was one last segment that we want to do real quick. And just real quick, this was we get a twofer today. We get a twofer. This is our other theological rabbit trail.
Yeah.
So Hannibal, our last question before we wrap up today. Brother, why did Yeshua tell Nathanael, Philip, Andrew, and Peter they would see the heavens open?
I think it was referencing to the day of the Lord, where the Son of Man comes down with the Joel 2 army that we see to root out the wicked, but also we see the angels, the fishermen, in Jeremiah 16, I believe, 14 to 30, that are to collect the saints from the 4 corners of the earth. So they will see, as Paul also mentioned this in First Thessalonians chapter 4, that we will meet him at his coming. So as Yeshua is coming down, we're being gathered by the angels after we were resurrected to meet him in the air. And he's told this to multiple people, even to the high priest when they were trying to accuse him, right? He said that truly you'll see the Son of Man standing on the right hand of the Father. And I think it's in 2 Baruch chapter 51 where he says that the unrighteous people in Sheol will see the resurrection take place and their torment will increase even more. So I don't know exactly how that's going to work out, but it seems like even those that don't get resurrected at the last trumpet will see us being glorified. So praise God for that.
Yes. So imagine meeting Yeshua, and in the first day, he tells you you're going to take part in the resurrection.
Yeah. Talk about confirmation, right?
Like that's a strong, they want to follow him. He's going to be he's going to be their master, so to speak, and disciple them. Mm-hmm. And they want to follow him. And the first thing he tells them is like, oh, by the way, you're going to be in the resurrection. Mm. Like, what an encouragement, man. What an absolute encouragement. It reminds me of the thief on the cross where he tells him the same thing, the first day he met him. And it's and this is the judge who's responsible for that decision. Like, this isn't just empty words. This isn't just an inspirational speech. This is the guy that's going to make that decision, given him that authority to him by the Father. Yeah. I just, it's mind blowing, guys, that Yeshua he doesn't he wants, not only does he, you know, he was gifted and with the Spirit of God dwelling in him greatly as the best teacher ever, but he knows what people need. And how interesting when Philip, when he was like, hey, this man is a true Israelite in whom there's no deceit.
Yeah.
You know,
I think he was talking about Nathaniel, right?
Oh yeah, that was Nathaniel, right? So that's just another thing, right? Like,
yeah,
the moment he meets him, he's like, this is a true Israelite. You guys want to know what the true definition of an Israelite is? There it is. It's the same thing that Paul tries to tell you in Romans chapter 2, 25 through 31. Is that this is the definition of actually a quote unquote Jew or an Israelite. Is it someone that in whom you're doing the Torah, in whom there's no deceit? You are doing the Torah, right? So yeah, it's beautiful, beautiful how our Messiah just can get your attention in the most wonderful of ways.
Yeah. And the people that he said that to, they knew that he was the judge, because Nathaniel said that you truly are the king of Israel. So he already believed that he's the judge. And hearing that is just like, man, amazing.
Yeah. It's truly beautiful, man. Truly beautiful. Well, thank you guys for letting us go along this theological rabbit trail. Okay. All right. Brother, I really appreciate you joining me today. It's been we didn't go 3 hours. We only went 2.5. So what do you know? But brother, is there anything you'd like to talk about before we go, or anything you'd like to say?
Not really. It's, you know, it's a blessing to be a moderator for this chat. I mean, people are so hungry for the word, and it's always friendly discussion. And you know, like I said previously, just be encouraged. You know, for me at least, there's nothing quite like digging into the word. I've sort of become all I think about throughout the day is the word, and you know, just trying to understand it better and better and walk it out. And you know, I saw some people in the comment section that are sharing some things that they're struggling with, and I'll definitely keep you guys in my prayers. But you know, be encouraged. Yah hears, Yah sees you. Absolutely.
Yeah, he does. Yeah, I just want to encourage you, brother. You've been a huge blessing to us. Appreciate you being so faithful to attend, you know, whenever we do live streams as you're available, obviously, and just being able to be a resource for people to help them, you know, with finding other videos where we've talked about topics and they may have found us for the first time, you know, and I can't address everybody in the live chat as we do a video. So I really appreciate you and all the other moderators in the live chat that take their time to make sure things stay civil and people have a resource to our other topics and videos. But I just want to encourage you, brother, that, you know, I love your heart, and I love that you're searching the word out. I mean, you know, you and I, we fall into this pattern of what we just read in John 1 with Philip and Nathaniel. Like we're searching the scriptures for the Messiah, right? We're searching for him, and he will reveal himself to us just like he did. So we're just be patient and wait for that great day. Yeah. Yep.
All right. It was a pleasure getting to join.
It surely was. Thank you so much for being here. And guys, in the Hannibal, you can take off if you need to. I'm just going to play this little outro song that I played at the beginning as well, just because it was about preparing the way of the Lord, like John the Baptist was. So just thought it would be a fitting outro song. But I really appreciate you being here, brother. Hope you have a great Shabbat.
Shabbat shalom, everyone.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Thank you guys for being here. You guys are awesome. And we hope that you come back and see us next week on Torah Portions as well.
hearts to meet. The one is coming. Every valley shall be raised. The rough places become plains. His salvation comes today to those who would receive him. Together we'll behold every knee bending low on the day of his coming. Now is the time of urgency. You must repent and believe, for the day of reckoning comes with his coming. Yes, the way of the Lord, the King who is coming. Yes, the King is coming. He is coming. The King is coming. The King is coming. The King